Happy New Year to everyone. I'm going to call our meeting to order. This is Carson City Airport Authority meeting on Wednesday, January 20th. And if we could get a roll call and determination of a quorum, that'd be great.
Chairperson Golden.
Here.
Vice Chair Harris.
Here.
Treasurer Rogers.
Here.
Member Jones.
Here.
Member Hamilton.
Here.
Member Pulis.
Present.
Member Hutter.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Fantastic. Mr. Jones, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, sir. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to approve the minutes of past meetings, and then we're going to go a little off script. Does anyone have any comments on the approval of the minutes from the last meetings? Because I do. Anyone? Okay, let me state what my issue is here on this. I had read through the minutes, and this had to do with the discussion of a survey being conducted. My recollection is completely accurate. However, I was of the understanding that this survey would be conducted and that myself and Vice Chair Harris would convene on it to put it together. That's not the way the minutes reflect. I do recall having a little meeting with Bradley outside our meeting room here after the meeting. I don't recall the airport authority directing Ken to work with Vice Chair Harris on this, and it would be inappropriate that Ken do so. Whatever the recollection is, I just want to make sure the minutes accurately reflect what we discussed.
I think that's accurate. We were going to work on it, and in fact, I did send you
Absolutely,
questions.
and we did.
So,
you and I did convene over the phone too. So, okay, I want the minutes to reflect that. This would be page, I believe it was 5 of the draft minutes from the November meeting. That both the chair and vice chair would work on this matter together. So who's in charge of making sure the minutes reflect that?
Danielle Howard for the record, right here.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Danielle Howard, public meetings clerk for the record. I'm responsible for that, so I can go ahead and make those changes.
Okay, you can do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other comments on the minutes from our last meeting? Okay. With that, could we have a motion to adopt those minutes as revised?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? A second. Okay, so that was, John, did you move that? Carl did. Okay. So we have a motion by Member Hutter and second by Member Hamilton to approve the minutes as revised. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. I'm going to go off script a little bit here. A little off script on a couple of different things. And it's actually good timing. So, number one, a belated Merry Christmas to everyone. As a gesture of good faith, I bake as a hobby, and it's impractical for me to bake all of you a batch of brownies. But what I did was, last night, knowing that we'd be here tonight, I baked a batch of brownies, put on a pair of gloves today, latex gloves, so that no germs, used appropriate, safe packaging, packaged the brownies, and everybody has a brownie from me to you enjoy. They're fantastic. I've been working with the recipe for a number of months now. Baking is a hobby of mine. I enjoy it, and my good friends occasionally get an entire batch for their family, but it was impractical to bake like 7 to 9 batches. It just wasn't going to happen. So I hope you guys enjoy. That's why there's a brownie in front of everybody's, microphone this evening. Modification of the agenda. I see no need to modify the agenda. If anyone else wishes to modify the agenda, please, now would be the time to say something. Anything? Okay. Public comment. Couple of things on this. We're going to take a little different course of action. In particular, since there's no one here from the public this evening, I am going to state that on every one of our meeting agendas, there's an email address, an official email address to send public comment, and we received no public comment in general for this meeting. Again, so I think I stated that in the last meeting. If there's anyone who's going to participate and provide public comment, instead of doing so on an agenda item, they may do so at the beginning of the meeting when we call for public comment, and again at the end, instead of on an item-by-item basis. So with that in mind, is there any public comment?
It looks like we have 2 callers, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It looks like we have 2 callers for public comment.
Okay, now would be an appropriate time if they'd like to provide that comment.
Caller, it's your turn for public comment. Please state your name for the record.
Mr. Chair, this is Chris Knox, Armstrong Consultants. I'm just online for the engineer's report later in the meeting.
Okay, and is there anyone else for public comment?
Caller, it is your turn for public comment. Please state your name for the record. That is all for public comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, now that we're through public comment, one other thing I'm going to respectfully request, and this is only a request, not a mandate, but when you're not speaking, if you could wear your face covering like Vice Chair Harris is doing. I hate to point it out, but I'm complimenting you. For those who can, if you could wear your face covering when you're not speaking, I'm going to do the same. Yes, sir.
Before we get going, I could hardly hear what's going on out there. Either you could speak better into the microphone or they could turn the thing up there. It's just, I'm having trouble hearing.
So when I speak, you can't hear?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the speakers are on here at all, so if there would be a way to fix that, that would be great, because I'm only hearing half of what's said.
Towards me? How, like that? Yeah, I hear you well then. Okay. All right, fair enough. At this point, we're going to be giving a presentation of service award to John Barrett. Mr. Barrett, I know you're around. Where are you? John, can you get up here or you want me to come to you? Whatever you want. I'll tell you what, you stay there. I can do that. I'm good at that. Okay. My wife tells me to do that all the time, and I do. Volunteering our time here every time we come here. And John was dedicated to holding the airport first on behalf of all the people. And I just want to thank you for your service. Thank you. You want to have a comment? Of course, please. Thank you. I'll even take this off so people can hear.
First off, I want to say with board members with whom I served, it was just as much a pleasure for me to serve with you. As Michael said, it has been a pleasure to work with me, and I really appreciate that. Secondarily, to the new members, Carl Hutter, whom I used to cover when I was with the paper, and he was on the Airport Authority. It's good to have you back on the Airport Authority. I know you and your family have done great things for this airport and will continue to. And to Stan Jones, who has replaced me as the member who is the liaison from the Board of Supervisors, I'll say what I said about Lisa Schutte, another new member of the Board of Supervisors. The new member here will be better than the person he's replacing. And thank you very much for recognizing me. I apologize for not making the last meeting in December. I plead that I'm 4 months older than the current president of the United States, and consequently, I spaced it off, as I told Ken Moen when he called me that night. But of course, I blame him because he's the one who changed it from a Wednesday to a Monday. But anyway, and Ken, to you, you've done a great job and keep doing it. All of you, keep our airport safe and improving. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
And before we go into the meat of our meeting, I also want to introduce formally Supervisor Jones, who is replacing John Barrett. Stan has a very, very impressive resume. If you don't mind, I want to first off thank you for your service to our nation. That is extremely commendable of you, sir. Can't begin to thank you enough for your military service. Stan retired as a brigadier general from the Guard, and that's the Army Guard. And Stan's been in the community for many years. If I'm correct, Stan, you're a veteran of foreign war, is that correct? Vietnam or Korea? What's that? Okay. And Stan's also a business owner. Blue Avocado, correct, Stan? So Stan owns the Blue Avocado gift shop here in town, and he's just done a tremendous amount of community service. He was inducted into the Nevada National Guard Hall of Fame, Selective Service Meritorious Service Medal, American Legion Award for service to veterans in 2012. He is a graduate of UNR, Army Command and General Staff College, and U.S. Air Force Command and Staff College. Just a tremendous, tremendous resume, Stan, and we're honored to have you join us. You are welcome. I'm going to pass this back to Tim. You mind helping out there? Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda for possible action to approve the T-Mobile airport beacon and ground lease for installation of cellular antenna and support equipment. Unless anyone wants to pull that matter off the agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Was that Member Rogers? Thank you, sir. And do we have a second?
This is Bradley Harris. I second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved. Let me interrupt for just a second. Paul, I saw you working there with the PA system with the monitor. What I think is going on here is there's some reverb.
I can hear now. It's turned way down.
Okay. Do you hear the reverb on this? No? Okay. Okay. Okay.
He's a musician, so he called it reverb instead of echo. I'm just pointing that out.
Okay. We're going to move on to discuss the airport tenant user survey results, maybe make some recommended actions to improve airport authority practices.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
question?
Yes, sir.
Did we vote on the consent agenda?
We sure did.
Okay, that happened really quick, man. That was, I got lost in that with the reverb and the other stuff.
That's,
Sorry
we
about
did.
that.
We voted
My
unanimously to
apologize.
approve that matter.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, we're gonna-
Question for the chair
Yes, sir.
on this. Is it, I see from your, from what you have up on the screen, is it your intention to go through every one of these questions?
I don't think, that's not my intention.
Okay,
If the-
I am
unless you'd
delighted to
like
hear that.
Unless you'd like to do so.
Actually, I mean, I've prepared some summary thoughts from this, but I mean, just try to boil it down from my own understanding and prepare to
yeah,
talk to it. But
we'll get on to this. How's that? I think it would be, we can go through each slide real briefly. How's that? If we really want to.
I'm not saying I want to.
Okay.
I'm hoping that we can
Well, why don't we,
summarize.
let's move into it and maybe we'll give you the floor. How's that? Okay. So there was a discussion that ensued in the last meeting between Member Pullitz and Member Vice Chair Harris about user sentiment, and there was a decision made to form a subcommittee between myself and Vice Chair Harris to facilitate a survey that was going to go out to our users. And with that in mind, I took the liberty to facilitate that survey on behalf of the airport authority when I had some time, which was after Christmas, before New Year's. And we sent that survey out to our tenant list. I had the email list from our airport manager. We also have an internal list of airport users that the survey went out to. And we received back 188 responses from this survey. It was enlightening. There were some productive comments, some unproductive comments, some unintelligent comments that came through. You could tell. Before I get too far into this, though, I need to take some ownership on this matter. I received some consternation about the survey, and this was the first time I'd ever used SurveyMonkey and the first time I had ever put out a survey of this nature. Again, I was facilitating this. I take responsibility for gathering the questions, putting the questions on the survey, getting the survey out to our users. And in the process, I did not realize how the work product was going to appear when people received it. It came from my junk email address. I have one of those. I'm sure everybody else has one too. And I used it. And so the sender, I did not realize that the sender would be an email address. I also didn't realize that the first question would pop up in that email as part of the message. So I want to take responsibility. That's all on me. I did that. My mistake on the presentation, but the content, regardless, is there. I'm told 188 responses is significant. With that in mind, we can get into the meat of the matter. And Bradley, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Michael. What I've done so that I could understand this myself was take the categories and break them down, I mean, and combine them a bit. What I did instead, in some cases there were 5 possible answers, in some cases there were 7. What I have done is just take the top 2, which is usually something like favorable, extremely favorable, or agree, strongly agree, that sort of thing. Combine those 2. I've taken the bottom 2 responses, which is disagree or strongly disagree or whatever, and labeled that unfavorable. So I have a favorable and an unfavorable. And then the middle, what was left over, I put into a neutral category. And that way I could look at it more, I don't know, there's just so many numbers here. I was trying to find a way I could make some sense of it. So, to explain a little further, the first 10 questions or the first 15 questions were the questions that I prepared and sent to Michael. The first 10 are about Ken and specifically regarding the airport manager. And the next 5, 11 through 15, are specifically regarding the Board of Trustees, that's us. And then there were some additional questions, 16 through 30, that I wasn't aware we're going to go on here. Many of them are duplicates, really, of questions before, and in some cases, they're just almost exactly the same question, like 21 and 27. So, I mean, in some cases, we're kind of overcounting here, but it's still very instructive, I think. The first thing to say is, in terms of, I'll just go through the 10 questions because I think these are very meaningful in that they're particularly involved Ken. The first question was, something about I found Ken responsive, and the rating, the favorable end of things, 49% say they found him responsive, and the neutral is 26, and then there are unfavorables 26. So you can say, 3/4 of the airport have found Ken to be either responsive or they have no argument, not enough to at least to say unfavorable. So that means about 1/4 of the airport find Ken unresponsive for some reason. The next one is informed by Ken. In this case, he got 61% of the folks in the airport saying that they find him to be keeping them well informed. And again, about 1/4 of the airport reported that they feel they're not well informed by Ken. So about 1/4 of the airport. When it came to the question, the interactions with Ken, they find, do you find him pleasant and professional? 61% of the folks on the airport agreed with that, and 10% gave a neutral response, and then we have about 29% that say no. Then we get to, is Ken promoting growth? And we got about, again, a strong favorable response, 61%. Unfavorable, 29. Maintaining the airport, we've got either between neutral and favorable, we're looking at 72% agreeing, liking that. At least they're not arguing with it. 27% saying Ken's not doing a good job maintaining the airport. On safety and security, 57% say favorable, I think is strong. 26% are saying unfavorable. Economic activity, 39 versus 35. Positive relationships, 43% say it's positive, and 35% say that it's a relative weakness. Promoting aviation, 42% say it's going well, and 31% are saying it's unfavorable. And then there's this question of fiscal stability, and 40% feel that's good, and 30% feel it's not. Now, what's interesting to me is that there is kind of a floor on the criticism, if you will. It never really gets below 25% on any of the items that I went through. So we have 1/4 of the airport that, for whatever reason, cannot give Ken a positive response on anything, okay? But the interesting thing is, when you get to growth economic activity, positive relationships, promoting aviation, fiscal stability. These are areas where they have a stronger negativity than the rest of the time. So I want to comment on that from the standpoint of this question of growth. All I'll say is, Ken, you're not getting your message out. Because we've talked about this, there's been growth on the airport. There's been growth on the airport. For people to look at that and say we had 3 new businesses added this last year, as you told me. We have a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of positive stuff going on, and we just got to get that message out. But it's definitely an area that we need to work on. And the other one's economic activity. That's sort of a duplicate of growth. I don't know. But again, it's an area of weakness. It's another place that we can promote the message. Positive relations is another weakness, and that was worded positive relations with the community. So we're not really, when we say community, unless they're thinking the airport community, and I don't know what they're thinking, then it's more of the focus of the town. And that was an area where the negativity jumped up quite a bit. And so it's an area that I think we, as not only Ken, but as an airport authority, we can focus on. We can improve that perception that we have positive relations with the community. Promoting aviation was another place where we had a weakness. Now, I have to say, during a pandemic, I think it's a little more difficult to promote aviation, but it's still an area that the users are concerned about. So we can certainly focus more on that. And again, I think that also falls on the board. And when it comes to fiscal stability, interesting that Ken gets, I'm comparing answer 10 to answer 15, and the 10 is fiscal stability regarding, Ken's work on fiscal stability for the airport, versus the question 15 is the Board of Trustees. The favorable rating is almost exactly the same, one's 40, one's 39. So they feel about the same in terms of favorability of the trustees versus Ken working toward fiscal stability, and that's not a good number. If 40% are feeling that way, that's not a good number. We want them to feel stronger about that. The interesting thing to me is that all the budgets that Ken spends against, and all of the big spending that Ken does comes to the board and is approved by the board. Yet Ken's rating is unfavorable rating is 30%, and the Board of Trustees rating is 18%, negative is 18%. So they're blaming Ken for what we're doing. We're the ones passing the budgets. We're the ones approving the spending, okay? I think that's very odd. So again, I think focusing on this growth question, economic activity, sort of the same thing, positive relations with the community, and promoting aviation are what our tenants are telling us they want us to focus on. Just a couple observations in here too. I think this is interesting. When it comes to promoting growth, Ken gets a 43 favorable. The Board of Trustees gets a 29. Okay, so apparently they think while Ken maybe isn't promoting growth enough, they seem to think we're not promoting growth at all. So I think we have work to do, and I think we need to work more on promoting growth. Let me just say that. But also, when it comes to improving safety, Ken gets a 59 favorable rating. This board gets 33. We have a lot of work to do. If they think that we don't care about safety, and that's obviously what they're telling us, we got a lot of work to do. Just those are my main observations. The board needs to work on improving safety, improving growth, and making people understand how the financial management of the airport works. And I'd like to see Ken focus on growth, focus on the positive relations with the community, and promoting aviation, because that is what the tenants told us. That's all I have.
Thank you, Bradley. Who would like to opine next, members of the Airport Authority? Carl, go ahead.
I had a question to start off with. And first off, thanks to Chairman Golden and the Vice Chair to have actually gone through and taken your time and made this happen. This is not a small piece of work, and thank you to the members of this authority for contributing to those questions as well. I'm curious to know if it's possible, or if you've done the analysis to understand when we see some of the responses, be they positive or be they negative, be they about the trustees or they be about the manager, is there strong correlation between the respondents and the positivity or the negativity across all questions or categories of questions? I guess to say it another way, if you tended to be negative on one thing, did you tend to be negative on everything? Or is there a diversity of nuance to these things where I might say, manager on safety, excellent, manager on relationships, poor? I mean, do you see where I'm going?
Yep.
And do you have a sense of that from your data?
I'm going to answer this the best way I can. First of all, I never want to deal with this again. It was a lot of work. Bradley's good at this. Maybe we'll point him to do it on his own next time. The data is there. I haven't scoured through it. The responses are 100% anonymous. However, IP addresses are there. So you could find out who maybe, did what. I could, if we're interested in that, give Bradley the login and password and let him play around with it if you want to do that. It's available, but it would take a lot of work to figure it out.
Understood. Just wanted to see if that was an analysis that had been done to see if there was texture, or if people tended to have either an across-the-board reported positive experience or a negative experience.
We could pull a report by each user, how each user responded to the questions. Doesn't give a name, of course. It just says
Don't want one.
It's a respondent 1, respondent 2. I can probably pull that report, and if you'd like it, I can PDF it and send it to you.
Sure. If it's not a big deal, might be interesting.
Okay. So, John Rogers, do you have anything you'd like to add to this discussion?
Yeah, I do. I made the assumption that Member Hutter's question, the answer is yes, that people who were negative in one area tended to be negative across the board. That's an assumption. It's not proven. But the fact that the baseline number that Bradley referred to was so consistent, on each and every question, that we never varied from a certain baseline of negative responses makes me think that perhaps we had a cadre of the tenants that was overall negative and expressed their negativity. But my overall impression of this survey is that the results were remarkably similar to the community survey that we did when we established the strategic plan. I see very, very similar areas of interest coming out. And of course, this one had the overlay of providing some feedback on their specific interactions with the manager, and that was, of course, was not part of the community survey. But but in terms of the direction of the airport and what the tenants and in the previous survey, what the community wanted, I saw marked similarities. And so that's encouraging. You know, it's encouraging that the tenant community had similar interests to the overall community that we surveyed back when we did the strategic plan. So my summary of my feelings based on the data that Bradley presented and after reading all the comments are that there's two areas of interest, areas that the board may choose to address. One is I think that there's a tension in the airport community between the imperatives that were identified in the strategic plan and the requests that were a part of this survey that said that, hey, we want the airport to grow. We want the airport to deliver improved facilities. That conflicts there's tension between that desire of the community and the desire of some members of the community to make sure that the light general aviation community on the airport is not left behind as that growth occurs. There's so much of our growth plans and our growth objectives relate to bringing in heavier airplanes onto the airport, bigger, heavier airplanes on the airport. I think that if I was a guy who was a builder of experimental aircraft, or was a guy who just wanted to come in and fly his single engine, his single engine aircraft from time to time, I would say, oh, I hope I'm not going to get left behind as this airport grows. And so my comment on that is that I think that's a legitimate area of tension. I mean, the way that the airport's revenues are structured, every single category of revenue we have can be most easily increased by bringing in large gas-guzzling airplanes. We want airplanes that take up a lot of space, so we'd like to have big airplanes because that helps our land lease revenues. Big airplanes also are more expensive, so personal property taxes are way higher on turbine engine driven or more powerful and larger aircraft. And of course, our gas revenues, our gas tax revenues go up if we sell more gas to airplanes that consume more gas. And so if we say to our airport manager, hey, Mr. Manager, we want you to grow revenues, he absolutely is obligated to go and pursue larger turbine engine-driven aircraft to grow our revenues. And that, I think, is cause for concerns for members of the community who don't fly those kind of airplanes and are concerned about traffic, about I would say, influence or power over the airport operations. So what can we as a board do about that tension? And where my thoughts fall on that is we as a board have the power, if we so choose, to adjust the way that revenue happens to the airport in a way that may not be so skewed and so aggressively favor larger turbine engine-driven aircraft. We could do that if we chose to, and if we thought that was the right thing to do. If we don't choose to do that, it's unreasonable to expect that we would change the overall direction of the airport. And so if we don't do that, then I think that we could choose as an airport authority to make a way for a discussion to happen where these tensions can be brought to the surface and actually worked on. And my thought is that maybe there'd be interest in the airport community for the members of the board here who fly a bunch, or some other subset of this board, to convene a select committee to gather together some tenants from the airport authority and discuss ways that we can achieve our growth objectives using our existing revenue streams while minimizing the impact on the people who don't fly the planes that we're pursuing, who and may have slightly different desires and needs than the aircraft that we are pursuing. Because I bet you there's some great creative, useful ideas out there that could be mined, brought before the board, and we could act on them. So there's my couple of thoughts relative to growth issues. And then as far as the part of the survey that related to interactions with our manager, in my perfect world, I'll just talk about my experience. I have had many opportunities to have disagreements with Ken over specifics of the way that we do our finances and the way that the operations run. And I personally have always found that, Ken's a highly opinionated guy, but he's not a guy who is hard to communicate with. So what I would really hope, in my perfect world, the people at the airport who have an issue with the airport manager that they've had a run in or they have some bone to pick, that if they would not give up on Ken and just back off and complain from a distance, if they would engage Ken in a conversation and talk about interactions that are not happy with, I'd be willing to bet you that in the vast majority of those cases, they and Ken could come to a reasonable conclusion if they just don't give up on Ken. Ken is a guy who needs to be communicated with in order to solve problems, just like every other human being on Earth. And so I have and so in my perfect world, that's what would happen. We would all choose not to do the flight portion of the fight or flight and just go and complete the fight until we get we're comfortable where we land. But if we as a board want to do anything about those interpersonal interactions, I think the best that we could offer the airport community, the only constructive idea that I had, was to have regular meetings that are hosted by authority members, where we just bring together the varied interests in the airport and we discuss areas of interest and we discuss areas of concern and we together brainstorm solutions and then implement those solutions. But I say my strong preference would be that we aren't forced to do that we aren't forced to become middlemen, that we just let the adults on all sides of the discussions behave like adults and work them through to completion. So that's my input.
Thanks, John. Paul, what do you have to say?
Well, the survey, I generally look at the survey kind of like in my business, and anyone who has a business, if you're not getting 4 stars or above in that survey, then you're not doing very good as far as customer service. And so here we're nowhere near 4 stars. If I got ratings as in this survey in my business, I would be out of business. So I don't think it's very good. And I think if I go back a little ways, a couple meeting, maybe it was last meeting, I had said that we're having incredible complaints about Ken. And there was talk about that, and I have to say, Bradley, thank you so much for saying we need a survey. So now this has really gone from my problem to our problem. And we do have a problem. And I think if we're just trying to do numbers on who agrees and disagrees, well, I don't think they're very good. And if we go into the comments, the comments, has everyone read the comments? So we got yeses, We got yeses, okay, a lot of yeses. Well, the comments would give us a totally different impression than just trying to run the numbers here. And I mean, I went through, and when I told the board we had a problem, we got the survey. And I didn't know the problem was as widespread as what we found out. I don't know if everyone's also been getting the letters from customers about complaints at the airport. I assume so. I see the last one. I thought this one from Steve Hamilton was probably the most interesting that I've seen so far. These letters are part of our survey. And when I read this one from Steve, I actually know Steve Hamilton. I'm not related to him. He's a very upstanding citizen. He runs a great medical manufacturing business. And when I saw this, I thought, wow, that is really bad. So and basically what people have been telling me around the airport came out in the survey in the comments. And I think if we all read those comments, I think we ought to really say to ourselves, Carson, we have a problem. And so far, I haven't heard that anyone's really acknowledging that. And so I'm going to start that conversation. And I mean, and so I would first off say that these letters that are coming in, which are essentially comments, those should be part of the survey. And they're coming in more and more. So if I was going to go down through and look at some of the things that have basically been said, is that we're running this like a police state. And I'm going to go through. And I want you all to understand that this is what I've been hearing on a day-to-day basis. Now, it's coming to you, okay? You know, how is Ken? Rude, overbearing, hostile, hot-headed, thinks he owns the airport. Overbearing, has an attitude as always being right. Bossy, condescending, surly demeanor, chip on a shoulder, heavy-handed, contentious dialogue. Someone might have a better idea. Mean, less like a cop, standoff posture, made airport users disgruntled, made airport users disheartened, dictatorial, disregard for owners, bureaucratic, policeman, threatening attitude, unfriendly atmosphere, hates pilots, authoritarian manner, unfriendly. I'm the new sheriff, my way or the highway, big brother, overreaching, oppression. Now, that's what I've been hearing every day. This has finally come out, and I guess what I'm asking everybody here is to take this from, well, actually, others have been hearing it too, but I've spent most of my time as a board member dealing with this. And it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's not working. So I've got a big, long dissertation of problems I've got with Ken. And I don't know if I need to go over it right now. Maybe I should.
Why don't you, Paul, may I make a recommendation? Let's save those for our next agenda item.
Okay.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
But I want to express my thoughts here, is that if anyone thinks this survey is good, then they need to double check their ability to analyze what we're trying to do, and we have a long ways to go at that. And I'm kind of surprised we've been talking about the numbers and this, that, and the other thing. We really haven't been talking about the individual comments. And I think those are much more telling of our situation here, than the numbers, and the numbers aren't that good. And I guess that's enough for now. But the other thing is that I think that these letters that have been sent to all of us board members should be part of the survey, because that also adds to problems we've got and how we need to solve that. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Paul. Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me clarify this. We're talking now strictly about, we had two parts, one about airport authority, one about airport manager. Are we on both? Are we on airport authority?
I don't think we're on anything about airport authority. This was a survey. Remember, we had
Okay, yeah.
solicited questions from members of the
But I
airport
just saw on the
authority.
agenda, we had authority, we had that. Okay, we'll talk about the
I
whole
don't
survey.
know
Okay.
what's going on
Very good.
there. This
That's
is,
fine.
we're talking about the user survey that was generated by questions
Okay.
submitted by airport authority members.
So I'm not going to separate the comments between the authority and the manager, but I do want to make a few comments. Number one, from my point of view, the survey, when we're referring to the community, is not a very effective survey because we only sent the survey out to users. So when they comment about what the community feels like, the only possible community can be addressed is the airport users, from my point of view, unless I'm missing something. So if someone has another comment on that, I'd be happy to hear that down the road. I'd also like to preface that I have a personal relationship with Ken Moen. He has been nothing but professional to me. He has been showing me he has great knowledge on FAA and airport matters, safety and security. I know that when Ken took the job, he was expected to tighten things up from a safety point of view. And we as a user, Paul and I are users. Carl is a user of the airport. We all acknowledge that there was a lot of people that were not adhering to our security protocols in a professional fashion. We're all aware of that, and we're pleased that Ken was trying to tighten up the security and make everyone more knowledgeable. The unfortunate part of this whole thing is, and I have to reiterate with Paul, about 35% of the users have a bone to pick with Ken right now. And most of it is, in my opinion, the delivery, not so much the message. The way the delivery is coming out is being held as contentious. And you can see some of this from the surveys. Some of the very professional users in the airport give me good comments about Ken and say that his knowledge in trying to work with the FAA and our safety and our security is satisfactory. So I'm seeing the whole broad spectrum. But being a user and being the pilot's rep, I'm also acknowledging that we have work to do. I'm of the opinion that we can improve this. I'm of the opinion that we can take steps as a board and as a manager to improve our relationships with the users and the community. However, it's going to be effort. There's going to have to be a commitment from us and from Ken to acknowledge the priorities of issues and start tackling them one at a time until we feel that we're satisfactory. And if we can do that, I'm going to be very proud of this group because I think that Carson City Airport's a fabulous place to do business. I think it's a wonderful airport. I think that it's got great potential. John, one thing you mentioned about concerns about heavier traffic in the airport. As a user, I hear that almost never, concerns. I've seldom ever hear that. I have heard the questions before, but when I say, well, if we look at it from the point of view as more heavier traffic that pays more fees so that you general aviation guys don't have to pay more fees down the road to keep it going, they say, well, if I looked at it from that point of view, perhaps I'm in favor of more heavy traffic. There's all sorts of different approaches along the way, and everybody we talk to, but unless Paul's heard something different, I don't hear a lot of concern about increasing some of our jet traffic into the airport. It's not been something that's been brought to my attention, at least as an airport, as the rep for the pilots. So I'm very glad we did do the survey. I believe in keeping things transparent. Thank you, Michael, for doing a great job. Yeah, first time in the survey, you could have done a little better format, but you know what? We got the essence of what had to be done here, and we knew what we all kind of
Like
knew.
I said, I take ownership.
And we kind of knew what to expect because Paul and I have been getting a lot of we've been taking the heat, and we have a lot of comments and concerns, but everything can be corrected, and it can be corrected quickly if we are all committed to that. That's my personal feeling, and I, as a board member, am committed to do whatever I can to be part of the solution, because I'm there enough to be part of the solution, whether it's meet and greets with the users, whether it's acknowledging some bad will that can be rectified, whether, whatever it is. It's like a family there. Those guys have been around there for many, many years, and they don't like to be told to change. It's tough. And a lot of them are curmudgeons, and a lot of them are great guys and curmudgeons. They just don't like to be told what to do. And it takes kind of sometimes a little bit of a delicate hand how to get the message across. Doesn't mean that we should ever sacrifice safety. It doesn't mean we should ever sacrifice regulations that protect us. I'm not saying that. Sometimes it just takes a different message. So with that, I think I've said enough.
Thanks, Tim. Stan, going to throw you into the fan blades. If you want to say anything, go ahead.
I would just like to address the survey. I've been involved in a lot of surveys, and you have to remember surveys are just a guide. They're not locked in stone. And just thumbing through this survey real quickly, it looks to me like probably 25 to 30% of the people were lazy or took the easy way out by saying, I don't have any opinions. I find that hard to believe if there's a problem. If there's a problem, I think they would voice it. I don't like that. Of course, I'm used to the military. When you said you filled out the survey, you filled out every damn line. You didn't pick and choose. And my other question, were these comments, were they signed? Do you know who signed them, or were they just?
No, sir. They're completely anonymous. I have,
So there goes your validity to some degree. I mean, if you have to sign them, you're going to think twice on what you say.
Well, we'll get to that later
No,
tonight.
That's just a general observation. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Sorry for putting you on the spot. I'm going to take an opportunity now that I've heard from it. Oh, Carl, do you want to say?
Well, I asked a question, and I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to actually provide feedback if it's a good time.
Go ahead, and then I want to provide my feedback on this matter.
Sure.
Go ahead. No,
So,
please.
a lot of great things have been said. I'm not going to repeat them. Most recently with Stan's comment about the challenge of surveying in general. Okay, this is a rough art in the best of worlds. I know a lot of folks who are in the marketing and public opinion space, and this is an endless quest to try to write the perfect survey and extract the perfect answers from it. And I think we would all concur that it is good enough to get a strong sense of which way the wind is blowing. I really do appreciate the comment that in some of these areas you get a few too many for my taste, right up the middle of neither agree nor disagree type answers, and that begs the question of, well, really? Where are you on this? But here's my take. I think that, as has been said in the Vice Chairman's good summary right out of the beginning, there are interesting feedback on all of the above here. And as others have said, the critique of both this body and of the manager, is strong. And I don't think anybody's looking great right here. And we have to all own that. And Ken's got to own his piece of that, and we've got to own our piece of managing Ken on this. And I think it also reveals probably some misunderstanding about whose job it is to do what around here. I think it was mentioned the attribution of whether it's fiscal responsibility or achievement of growth, what have you. And there may be some misattribution. So there's probably some better education and communication, if people are interested in receiving it, that we could do. One of the things, though, that I think jumps out here is, look, if we've just all come out of a big political season, if you're in politics, you know, a 55% or 60% approval rating, apparently the pundits say, ain't so bad sometimes, okay? This isn't a political matter, and this isn't, you know, it shouldn't be about, you know, shades of gray or even shades of black and white, or is it red and blue? Again, about political matters and opinions and philosophies. It's about safety. It's about fiduciary responsibility. It's about courtesy and professionalism. It's about customer service. And what that all adds up to mean is this is really not a political evaluation and those metrics. This is a business evaluation. And we need to use, I think, the more relevant criteria around, as was said, if you're not getting 4 stars, you got yourself a problem. And really apply the kind of criteria you would use around, you know, customer service and feedback around that. And to cut to the point, I do get very concerned when I see that the feedback around a question concerning, you know, our manager and our management, not in the way that we tend to engage, all right, in making decisions and deliberating investments in the airport and strategies going forward, but at the tip of the spear in the interaction with our customer. When we look at that subset of questions, where one I'm looking at here, question 3, when I've interacted with Ken, he's been pleasant and professional, the neither agree nor disagree is small. So it's interesting to note on that one, people do seem to have an opinion. And while certainly the majority of folks feel that it has been pleasant, professional, I don't believe that a 30% negative rating on that one is okay at all. And I think that's the kind of thing we've got to look at very, very carefully. Because if you have that kind of dissatisfaction in your customers, you're out of business. Okay, now, they are a bunch of characters. We are a bunch of characters, okay? Curmudgeonly or otherwise, big iron, light sport, home builder. Well, let's probably not get into the I'm just storing crap in my hangar side. That's a whole meeting in and of itself. But the point is that, you know, everybody deserves decency and everyone deserves a professional response. And that, you know, extends to even the most difficult of us. And, you know, I've had those employees, I've had those customers. Now, I think that's the area that jumps out to me the most. And within that subset, it's the comments about interactions. Now, personally, as a user of the airport, Ken, you and my interactions have always been incredibly pleasant, and you've been great and super responsive. I have no complaints, okay? Ken has done great at the thing that, for me as a user, is most important to me. Accurate answers to key questions about, is the runway clear? Is it safe? Fortunately, it almost always is open. The lights are working. The equipment's usually up. That AWAS gets a little weird, but okay. Well, that's my experience. And when I'm wearing my hat as a user, that's allowed to be the scope of my experience. Okay, but now I have the hat on once again of being a steward of the airport. And so it's not just about my experience. It's about their experience. And so I have to be very concerned, even if I don't understand it, even if I haven't seen it. What the heck is going on here where 30% of our folks are saying that we've had an unprofessional or uncourteous experience? Then when we go further to look at a question of some of the specific feedback, which can get sort of colorful, and we have to all take it for what it is, and you know, there are people out there who all have a bone to pick with each of us up here. But there's a threshold that I, without drawing any sort of conclusions, think needs to be looked at very carefully by the right folks, you know, in this organization. And it comes to some of the tone of specific interactions that suggests to me, even if I haven't seen it, quick to anger or hot-headedness, discourteousness, whether the merits of the situation were this or that. I let people go at click bond for one instance of some of the things that have been reported in this data. No questions asked, because it's not who we are. And it's about fit, and it's about an ability to handle oneself in the manner that's expected of a public servant and of a vendor of an important service to that community, be they user, tenant, community member, meaning public servants elsewhere in our community. And I do know, to the question that was asked, because I think the chairman answered this when I asked him this clarifying question, there were surveys sent to people who are not just airport users. I don't know, and I'll let you speak to the details of that. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that it's about a representation of who we are. And I don't want to drill on this too hard, but I just want to say that even one or two of those kinds of scenarios has to beg, the question of how do we handle things that are often high-stress situations. And I just think that that bears further investigation. The last thing I just like to say, because the airport authority itself has received some pretty strong feedback, and not just in these surveys, but I've tried to get myself back up to speed again. And so I've read some of those letters, I've had some follow-up conversations, I've sort of done some probing out there myself. And one of the themes that I want to share with my fellow authority members here and with Ken and our staff is that the authority has taken some black marks, and there's a theme out there around our failure to do something. That doesn't mean our failure to act on every one of these pieces of feedback. But there's a sense that this authority could take a stronger hand, a more proactive hand, as truly the executive of this airport. Ken's role is really as a general manager, as I understand it. We are the executive, and it does come back to us. And so, whether it's about safety or service, whether it's about community relations or fiscal stability and fiduciary responsibility, we have to own this. And, I'm not suggesting anyone here has been asleep at the wheel. I'm not throwing stones. But I think that our community is sending a message that says we need to do more as well. So I just offer that as my thoughts on this data.
Fantastic, Carl. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. I'm going to give my opinion now, if that's okay with everybody else. First and foremost, let me digress for a minute. I put in, I believe, the last 3 questions on this survey, and I used the opportunity to ask a couple of interesting questions because I just wanted to know. So perhaps you could say I hijacked the survey. Let's keep in mind the purpose of the survey was airport user satisfaction. That's what it was. So there were a lot of questions, and I honored everybody's. There were a lot of questions that didn't have to do with customer service. I still put them on the survey out of equity for everybody. But I took the opportunity to put one on myself. And that was, where was this here? Looks like somehow we're missing question 29 on this package I have here. No, 29, hold on a second. It had to do with what do you like about the airport, okay? Let's see here. Or maybe it wasn't 29, or what improvements.
29 is
on
missing
one of the
from
white
one of these.
sheets. It's
Okay,
on
so
one of
that
the
was
white sheets.
Yeah, it was one of the question sheets where it was answered. What I had gathered was, and I'm going to talk to the survey in a minute. Here it is. I was close. If the airport authority could do one thing to improve the airport, what would it be? Now, I'm not going to get into the negative. There was a lot of that. One of the things that was a common thread, and I should have counted these, I'll bet you there are no less than 30, probably 40, to put in a restaurant. I just want everyone to know that. The other thing that I found very interesting about the survey, and again, I wanted to look at the data in addition to the customer comments, which I'm going to get to in a minute. Somebody asked the question, one of us as Airport Authority members asked the question, what do you like about the airport? It was not me. That was not my question. The number one response, overwhelmingly, was location. And it does not surprise me in the least. We have a very valuable asset that we oversee. I see the world through the lenses of real property because that's what I've done all my life. And I understand that response and why people like the location. It's all about the location with people. So I want to put that out there and digress for a minute. But let's get back to the core of the matter here. I want to thank Bradley and Tim for making the suggestion that we put this survey out there. We had to ask these questions, and I'm going to be saying some pretty tough words tonight, and it just is what it is. Because if this airport authority wants to have a tin ear and not be responsible to our constituents, then members of this airport authority don't belong sitting up here. When I read through these responses, one of the things I gathered, and let me state, I do not yield to the court of public opinion. It's on. Thanks, John. I do, as a person, I do not yield to the court of public opinion. But I take this survey seriously, and I only wrote 10% of the questions. Okay? And one of them had nothing to do with directly with customer user satisfaction. When I started reading the responses, I contacted Ken, and I told him, hey, Ken, here's kind of where things are at. It's really interesting. And I had emailed a few of you folks, didn't want any responses back, and just said, hey, just letting you know, here's where things are falling out. And nothing really changed as the numbers went up, the responses. The averages stayed the same. When you look at this, there's one or two basic things I can extract from this. Number one, Ken, and this is constructive criticism. It's not criticizing you as a person. It's constructive criticism. You're a polarizing figure. I'm seeing that in this information that we got. You're a polarizing figure. It's not a bad thing necessarily. It's not a good thing necessarily. But that's what I'm seeing here. If my business had numbers like this, I'd be out of business. Okay? 60% approval is pathetic. It is a failing grade. Let me tell you about some numbers, because I don't see, we must be looking at two different surveys, because I'm hearing that the numbers are okay, or they're as expected. Please rate your experience of interaction with airport management. Okay. 32% of respondents were either dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. Of the satisfied and very satisfied, 48%. Again, polarized. Okay? But when you have 32% of your customers who are disillusioned with you, and you can't even get a majority of them who are behind you, there is a problem that needs to be addressed. This was a real important one to me. Again, my question. Do you feel valued as a customer when interacting with the airport manager? 31%, nearly, it was 30.61%, felt dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. In fact, the very dissatisfied on that question was nearly 20%. Of the satisfied and very satisfied, 46%. So again, you have 31% who are disillusioned when asked if they feel valued as a customer here, and 46% who say they're satisfied. You can't even get a majority of customers there saying that, we have a majority of customers saying that they're satisfied. And now this was not my question, but again, it goes back to what I was stating when I discussed this with Ken initially. How would you rate your experience with management at the airport? And this was a number of stars. The weighted average was 3.12% out of 5 stars. That's 60%. And I'm seeing 60%, if that, and sometimes less, across the board from this survey. Some of these questions I felt were great. I'm not going to go through the written responses. I feel that's inappropriate at this juncture. But here's another question, again, along the same lines. As a tenant, how would you rate your experience at Carson City Airport with regards to management? Exact same number. 3 out of 5, 3.07 out of 5. So we're getting a 60% rating here. That's a failing grade in my book. That's a failing grade in anyone's book. That's a failure of a business. That's a business that goes out of business. That's customers who leave your business. And that is absolutely, positively unacceptable. There's not just room for improvement, there has to be improvement. Because these, again, unacceptable. And the other thing is, I'm not seeing this carry over to the airport authority's responsibilities. I know you had run some statistical things, Bradley. I'm not seeing that correlation. Okay? Here's another one. Overall, how would you rate the airport manager's performance? Now, I don't have a calculator in front of me, but it's a weighted average question. And it's 4 out of 7. I'm guessing that's about 60% again. And if I had a calculator, I could probably figure that out real quick. The bottom line is we ran this survey for a reason, and it was not to, say everything's rosy. It was to gauge our customer sentiment, and we need to react to our customers and improve their experience, bar none. This cannot go on like this, and if 40% of the customers are being alienated here, we have a problem that needs to be addressed. So those are my comments. Go ahead, Brad.
I just briefly to talk about surveys in general a little bit here, and what my purpose in proposing this to begin with was, first of all, when somebody gets a survey, especially in email, especially from an email address they don't even know, the tendency is going to be to look at it, I'm not interested, click it away. But for those people that have a bone to pick, by God, they're going to fill out that survey. And therefore, I don't think you can really talk about how 25% or 40% or any percent of the people on the airport, this is a percentage of the people that responded to a survey. It is not the population of the people on the airport. So let's get past that. Yes, the numbers are negative. I expected them to be negative, particularly because of the bias in the response rate. It is not about coming up with these perfect numbers and saying Ken, 60% of the people don't like you or something. It is about setting a benchmark against which we measure ourselves year after year. And I wish we'd done a better job with this. I wish we'd explained it to the people that the survey went to as to why we're doing this. And I think some were taken aback. In fact, I've read some things where they were like, it looks like they're trying to get rid of Ken. So I wish it had been done better. However, I think we're reading a lot of things into this that aren't there. We have to remember there's going to be a strong negativity bias with surveys. And what I would like to focus on is setting a benchmark and identifying the areas where we need the strongest improvement. And that's the reason I talked about where things are, the greatest dissatisfaction is with growth, economic activity, positive relationships with the community, and promoting aviation. And for the board, and I take this very seriously when we get this kind of feedback, that Ken's numbers are better than ours on promoting growth and on improving safety. I would just like to see us step back and say, this is a benchmark, let's work on it, let's set targets for the future, but let's get away from these solid numbers and talking about how 25% are mad. The other thing I want to say is, focusing on the negative comments. Again, this is just a bias. Paul, you read out all the negative comments. You didn't say any of the positive comments. That is not the purpose of a survey like this. If it was up to me and I had done this survey, I wouldn't have had any comments in it at all. Anonymous comments are anonymous. What I want to know are some benchmarks in order to be able to say, Ken, we would like to see this improve, and this improve. And board members, we need to focus on this, this, and this. That was the whole purpose of me putting, I don't have a porpoise. That was the whole purpose of me proposing this so that we had benchmarks for improvement over time. It was not to punish Ken. It was not to say, oh, we have horrible customer service. And it was not to say that 25% or 30% or any other percent of the users of the airport are dissatisfied, because I don't believe that's true. So let's step back, get back on the right path, look at this from the standpoint of a benchmark and plan on measuring it properly with a good explanation as to why it's going on in a year. That's all I have to say.
Any other comments? John?
First, let me say I was remiss. Like Member Hamilton, I'm very pleased that people took the time to comment on and off the survey. I think that's great. And I also was remiss in not thanking Michael for putting forth the effort. Thank you very much. So, okay, we as a board, we say, we have a manager who's more polarizing than we would like. We have a percentage of the airport community that is dissatisfied with their interactions with the manager. What next? Where do we go from here? I mean, what I don't like is when people say, oh, this must change. How would you like to change it? And so when I look at this survey, yes, I see issues. I see the start of a conversation. What I would really like to talk about is, what are we going to do? What's our proposal as a board in order to nurture the conversation until we accomplish what we want, which is improved customer satisfaction, apparently, and I agree with that. So it's a little bit more complicated. So than just say, oh, maybe we need a new manager. Is that the best way to get to the end point? And I'm not sure that I would propose that. So if we're not going to propose that, what are we going to do? I'd love the idea, any idea that allows the conversation to continue and to be brought to a different spot through interaction between people, all about that. And happy to participate in any way that I can on that. But to look for the, I hate it when, when structural issues are identified as being caused by a specific individual, because they never are, in my experience.
I have one last comment.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, John. That was well said. I just have a proposal that I'd like to have you all consider. Perhaps a committee of 3 to be assigned to work together and with Ken to address the negatives and see if we can come up with a path and a vision to improve what we are trying to accomplish.
Could I just add that I think that 3-member group should also focus on what the board needs to do, because the Board of Trustees has some real weaknesses here. I don't think I want to pile on Ken and not address what the board is doing.
No argument there. I have no argument with that. That's fine. All issues should be addressed.
Anybody want to volunteer? Tim, your idea? Go ahead.
Well, I'll volunteer to be on the committee if you'd like. I'm with the
Yeah,
users
sure.
all the time. I have an ear to the users. It's up to other people that would like to be part of it.
Understood. Okay.
This is Paul. I'll have to say that I've been working on it for the last 3 years. I've been working very hard with Ken to try and improve the relationships. So, and I'm going to give you some examples. Well, I'll hold off, but I will say that I have been working very hard with Ken over the last 3 years on a number of issues, and nothing has seemed to work. So it's a great idea, and I've already been doing that, and at this point, I'm pretty. It's hard to make any progress in that, and.
John, would you volunteer for that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do it, but I'm quite concerned that I'd be discounted badly because I'm not an airport, user. I'm happy to do the work as long as Member Pulitz thinks that it's impossible for me to be constructive without being one of the in crowd.
Well, I'll weigh in. I think your input would be invaluable. But that's, Tim, what do you think? Yeah?
Yes, I think, John, you're very open-minded. I think you look at things in a very level thinking manner, and I think you'd be valuable. And I think so would Carl.
Haven't we already hit our 3? No, I think just I'm going to comment on the John's question, which is, no, I think that being above the fray of sort of the traditional user groups and perspectives, and I think that's a valuable piece to have in this. That's that outside consultancy. Would be very good.
Are you willing to volunteer, Carl? I'm putting you on the spot.
Who do we
You can say
have
no.
here so far?
What's that?
Who do we have so far?
Tim and John. If you want, I'll do it. If not, will you do it?
I just am a little concerned about time right now.
Okay.
So
Okay.
not disinterest. But
Okay, well, we have 2, and I'll volunteer, and if I have to step aside for any reason, we have 2 people, we're in good shape. Is that fair? Tim? Tim?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That's fine. Thank
Okay,
you.
so there would be myself, yourself, and John. If for any reason I have a time constraint, I know we're in good hands, which is 2 of you guys.
Well, it's going to be a fluid thing. We just have to sit down and come up jointly, the 3 board members and Ken, to come up with a plan that we think may have some value and see if we can execute it and then measure it. So it's going to be 2-part in my view. One is to is to identify specific things to address. Number two, to take action. And number three, to evaluate and give ourselves a time frame to evaluate and make it all reasonable and professional.
Okay, fair enough. Yes, yes, sir.
I'd like to talk about, that's not what I want. I want to state my opinion that Ken ought to be involved in all of these meetings. If we want to promote communication, improve communication between the using community and the manager, we ought to, I think we ought to have that start from the very beginning. I think it's dangerous to have it be the three of us and a bunch of users sitting around discussing issues that relate to communication between themselves and the manager without him being present. So I would be curious to see what you two guys think about that.
Yeah, John, that was my intention. My intention was to be fully inclusive.
Yeah, that's.
All the way
he
through,
had
all the way
stated
through.
that.
Because that's the only way to really get to the bottom of things is have it inclusive, not excluding anybody. So I would say that everybody can participate in this.
Yeah, and I also think that we want to get out of the middleman's role as quickly as possible, and I think we can, once we open the lines of communication a little better.
Okay. Any other comment?
If I just, before I forget, might offer one note on Vice Chair Harris's comment about what surveys are and what surveys aren't. And I very much agree, and I appreciate your sharing, like, hey, let's keep perspective. There's confirmation bias, there's self-selection, there's all these things. Just specifically on the piece of anonymous comments, and this is something that we've wrestled with as an executive team. We do an annual employee engagement survey that we find very, very valuable. And so to that end, a benchmark that we can now see relative progress to, it's right on the spot. But when it comes to the free-form responses, look, you're going to get all sorts of stuff, as you can see from the responses on this one. I think, if I may offer it, the value of that, it's not to be totally discarded, nor is it to be tallied into little columns saying, let's try to boil this down to approval ratings, but themes. Okay, it's a really great way to pull out themes. And as you kind of said, hey, look, about the airport authority, about the management, about things that are in some other category, here are the top 3 things, pro and con, that we're hearing about, and that can start guiding the work. So I think that that's where the value is there.
Chair Golden?
Go ahead, Ken.
I think it's appropriate that I opine. I didn't come here with any prepared comments or remarks, but I do want to say that there's 2 relationships here. There's 2 relationships here. One is the board's relationship with me as their designee, and the other is the relationship between me and the airport community. And there's a strained relationship in that. And that strain and that tension, I think it was called, comes from the purpose of enforcing regulations on the airport. There's several regulatory categories, and you start with the FAA regulations. You work through the Carson City Municipal Code, which covers a lot of the traffic enforcement and business criteria. And then you also have, of course, the interpersonal relationships. And now there's been several instances in my time here where I've had to address airport authority members about either their actions on the airport, i.e. The gate policy, self-fueling, and other business activities. And I've mentioned before when we discussed Statute 844 that there's some tension in the regulation about the makeup of the board and sometimes the self-serving nature of the board. And those are difficult minefields to walk through. I cannot, for example, allow a board member to behave differently than I ask a tenant to behave. So that creates a very unique issue. But I'm going to point out a couple of real life examples in the manner of how I treat people generally. I am opinionated. I have been known to be forceful in my manner, and I don't look at that as a positive or a negative, but I obviously, as a human being, I have my own shortcomings. Paul Hamilton and I apparently have an issue that has risen to a level that causes me great concern. And the reason I say that is that when his term was expiring in October, he comes into my office and he says to me, Ken, my term's coming up. Do you want me on the board? And I said, Paul, absolutely. I said, I'm not looking for a board that's a rubber stamp. I'm not looking for a group that just looks at me to do their work and then they come here once a month and walk away. That's not what I want. And I asked you to reapply. As a matter of fact, I recruited you to fill the seat that was available. I recruited Tim Pulis to fill that seat. And I've tried to attempt to identify other people in the community that I think would provide value back to the airport, not for the sake of a beauty contest to make me look good. That's not my goal. Now, I can trace back historically to a couple of examples that created initial tension. And I'll bring that example to the gate policy that was created by the Airport Authority Board in 2009. And when I first got to the airport, I didn't do anything for 6 months but observe, meet people on the airport, meet people in the community, talk about how people viewed the airport, what they expected of the airport, how they saw the airport affecting them, whether it was as part of economic development for the community, as part of promotion of aviation on the airfield. And we've done a lot of those things and added those things to our strategic goals as a result of that. As a matter of fact, Carl commented on the strategic plan. That was an initiative that I drove with the board forward to develop a roadmap. We're 1 year into that plan, a 5-year plan. And this dialogue began by reviewing the annual work plan and establishing objectives for the second year. That's where this began. It was never, from my dialogue, and I had this conversation with Michael, was a Ken Moen performance metric. Now, the gate issue arose after I observed, not once, not twice, but more times than I care to remember, of people driving their POV on active taxiways and the runway surface. And when I pulled 4 guys out of an LTD off of the airport runway who didn't speak English and had no idea where they were, I immediately put a halt to that. I printed out the gate policy, I reviewed the gate policy, and the policy clearly states that you are not to leave the gate area until the gate closes fully behind you, and to prevent piggybacking for unauthorized people to enter the premises. There's signs on all the gates, physical signs right in front of you. We mark the areas where to stop and wait for the gate. I communicated through tenant bulletins about the policy. Now, the community didn't all appreciate that move. And I don't appreciate being deemed a cop with nothing else better to do, amongst other colorful language. So I spent 9 months individually counseling people who violated that policy. One of them was an employee that worked for you at the time. And the response I got was something similar to like, hey, he's gone at the end of the summer, don't make a big deal out of it. I can't do that. Because the first time an incident occurs on the airport, I'm liable, the airport authority is liable, and that's a dialogue nobody wants to have. The first thing they're going to say is, no, I'm looking at Member Hamilton. Because we're having a direct conversation. I don't want to be inappropriate.
Okay, I would like to say that I really enjoy working with Ken.
Okay, can I, but let me finish.
Oh, I was gonna second your motion.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Because this is not about people liking me or disliking me. That's really not my approach. So if an incident occurs and the lawyers start combing through your rules, your regulations, and they come across one about that, they're going to say, how are you enforcing this policy? Or why didn't you enforce this policy? Now we're exposed to huge liability. Last year, we did a risk analysis of all kinds of things with our insurance provider. Did we have board, and we discovered we didn't have any insurance to cover the board for liability. And we corrected that. So I look at those things every day when I'm on the airfield. Fought on the runway, and we've had discussions about that. Whether equipment's operating, whether or not this nighttime instrument approach needs to be done. But the polarizing issue is the gate policy. And my practice had been that I would go out to the roadway as they drive away, try to flag them down, try to get their attention. I don't have license plates that I can trace. I don't know who's in the car. I don't know if they're a member of the airport. And so if I get their attention, sometimes I ran up to their car whistling and waving, saying, please stop, in order to be able to talk to them. And I would hand them a sheet of paper that has a policy written on it. I'd identify myself and usually had a business card, not always. And I would say, hey, I'm the airport manager. I just want a friendly reminder about the gate policy. And often I would get a response that was very colorful and demeaning. Don't you have anything better to do? Hey, you effing, et cetera, pardon my French. So now this relationship that requires an interaction between two people has gone downhill very quickly. But I would do that routinely. For 9 months, I did that in order to improve that. And I would send out tenant bulletins regarding that. And I never asked a tenant to get in an altercation at the gate. I said, hey, if somebody doesn't want to show their card to you and they don't want to wait for the gate, just give me their information, the car, the time of day. I'll see if I can identify them and then have a chat. That was the objective. I've never brought anybody in front of the board asking you to revoke their gate privileges, ever. I've never made that threat. Just 2 weeks or during Christmas holiday, a UPS van was crossing the runway at midfield. I put a halt to that with UPS. I said, that's not a liability that either you or I want to take. And they agreed. Now, Weaver Aviation's not happy with that. And I've become a package deliverer to assist them, or I call them up and say, hey, I got some stuff for you in my office. One time is all that takes. It's in my manager's report, or not my manager's report, but the board report is the Mitsubishi incident. High stress incident, emergency response. I've got tenants self-dispatching to the scene as opposed to calling 911. Two critical things occur when you do that. One, they're not equipped for emergency response, and they're likely to become a part of the incident as opposed to being a help. The second thing is you now contaminate the accident scene. You got vehicles driving around, you got skid marks and tire marks that were obliterated, so that when the NTSB or the FAA comes out and decides to make an investigation, they're like, hey man, how come you got people out here on the scene? I made the decision to close the airport. It happened late in the evening. The sun was setting by the time the initial response was over. And I said, we're not doing anything tonight. Runway wasn't cleaned up. We closed the airport. I put out a note that said it was going to be closed till 10 a.m. because I had no idea. But it would give me time to get there in the morning, assess the situation, try to make some determinations. The liability to the airport in an incident like that is huge. Critical decision-making, judgment. I had to ask people to leave the scene more than once. And they're not happy about that. Driving out to take pictures on taxiway. So why did I close the airport? Because the last thing you want is aircraft moving around the movement areas during emergency response. Now, during that 12-hour period, were there times when somebody could taxi to the fuel island or go to their hangar and change their oil? Absolutely. But to open up taxiways and leave them open and the runway closed, there's no purpose for that. Somebody contacted me and said, hey, I need to go fill my airplane up. Is that okay? Yep, go ahead. changed the NOTAM 4 times. I sent out tenant bulletins each time. I conferred with council. I conferred with the chair. Now, that's not what the question is in a lot of this survey. It's not about that. This turned into a beauty contest about who likes me, who doesn't like me. And there are a lot of people that don't. I get that. I don't have a measure for it, but I did get several phone calls from a variety of people saying, hey, Ken, what the heck is this? Is this a hit job? Is it designed to help you or hurt you? And I didn't even know because I didn't know it went out. I had no idea. Chair Golden sent it to me after I called him, and then I looked through it and I went, oh, well, I guess we'll see how this plays out. Member Hutter called me about when we were doing the gate change out. And our contractor had laid out the way the engineer designed the plan. And I got a call from Carl Hutter saying, hey, man, that's going to impact our ramp. We met out there with our engineers, with our contractor, and we looked at a way to mitigate it. And I don't treat Carl Hutter any differently than I treat Tim Pulis, Chair Golden, or anybody. I've had to contact Chair Golden about conditions at the T hangars and debris around it. That's not my leasehold. That's not the airport's leasehold. As a matter of fact, the airport authority has few customers because a lot of the businesses on the airport, they're actually the customers serving those people, the fuel island. Chair Golden will recall in August when the fuel island was down. I got an email from you telling me you had it up to here with the customers. These are the same guys responding to the survey. Somebody threw chocks at one of your personnel or was trying to tell you how to run your business. I bet you didn't get a 4-star rating that day. But that's not the point. That was inappropriate for them to behave in that manner. Much less it's inappropriate for tenants to behave in the manner that I got addressed as, trying to enforce safety and security policy. So what's really important to me is the relationship here and then how we go forward. And I think there's always a path forward. There's always going to be some people that don't like me or you or what we're doing. But I know that with the framework and the foundation that we've laid over the last 3 years, that we're on the precipice of great things. Mitigating the nighttime approach, getting new development on the airfield, updating facilities that need to be updated, improving landscape and presentation of the community, getting air service, especially during the legislative session. You know, my time every day, I have a stack of work. And one of the comments I saw in there is, oh, you won't even find him in here till 9 in the morning. I didn't know that I had a meeting before I got there, or that I was on a call before I left, or that I didn't leave until 7 o'clock at night. So I look at that and I think to myself, they have no clue. The budget's improved every year I've been here, and we've made massive improvements in equipment and processes, and we're going to keep doing that. We've got a great airfield ops maintenance guy on board who's done great strides, and we got a ways to go, and he knows it, and he's all in. And so I feel confident in meeting with this committee and with this group about the things we can do together. And I hope that the disgruntled people will come along. But I'm not going to be able to hold hands with them. And there may be things I can never do to please some of those tenants. But that's not my goal. My goal is bigger than that. Safety and security, number one. Improving relations in the community, economic development, and then all that should fall into play. I don't have anything more to say. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments on this? John?
What I hope we accomplish over the course of time with our work group, and with Ken involved, is for us to refine our ability to separate policy from personality. My whole career in business is related to sales and trying to get what's in my head to come out of other people's mouths. And the key to any success that I may have had came from that ability to tell people no while having them be confident that I respect them as a person. And so Ken's displaying, can you just display the behavior that I would like to see us work on? And that is starting with the rules and regulations and justifying why your actions are correct. I pray that nobody on the airport disagrees with you. That we know we need to violate safety procedures according to to certain FAA regulations. If we actually get to the point where somebody's willing to say that to us, we have no place to go, and you're right about that. So what we can work on, though, is making it possible for us to come to what I assume will be an easy conclusion, that we all care about safety procedures and about the growth of the airport and so on and so forth. But then that we also all respect each other as individuals, and that we communicate with each other in ways that demonstrates that we respect each other as individuals. So that's why I think one of the best things that we can accomplish, I hope the other two members of the work group agree with me, best thing we can do is keep those communications lines open until we get past the posturing and we get to the person, and we get to the recognition of our what we agree on, and our recognition that the other person is just as kind, I'll not say kind-hearted, but just as genuine and as has issues that they care about personally, and they find our common humanity, I guess, might be a better descriptor. So I'm hoping that's what the other, what Member Pulitz and Member Golden are shooting for. That's certainly what I'm shooting for.
Thanks, John. Just one quick comment, Ken. When you just reiterated your priorities, you left out user satisfaction. You discussed it, but you left it out. And to me, I just want to make it clear from my point of view that user satisfaction is just as high a priority as the safety, relationships, fiscal responsibility. It's part of a well-rounded goal, and I just want to make sure that's the way I'm going to be approaching as a member of this little committee. I'm going to be approaching it from that point of view. Okay?
I don't disagree with you. Thank you.
Okay, that's what I want to make clear for the
you're
committee.
absolutely right.
Ken, two things I want to bring to your attention. One is constructive criticism. Another is a correction, because you inaccurately accused me of something, and I don't appreciate it.
Sorry.
Well, let me state it for the fact. I volunteered my time to do this survey and put it together and facilitate it. Like I said, 3 out of 30 questions, 10%. I put the survey out very late at night on a Sunday night. You weren't working. The next morning, I contacted you and told you, hey, the survey went out. Here's a link to it. So please don't say that I didn't collaborate with you on this and that I didn't inform you of it, because I did. Okay? Number two.
I don't recall it that way, but
Go ahead, Bradley, please.
Yeah, I just want to say there is absolutely no excuse for him not knowing that was going out before you pushed the send button. That is the way it should work.
I completely disagree with you, Bradley. It's not Ken's survey. It's the Airport Authority's survey.
or do you email?
Again, I brought this up before with you, Ken. I've said this many a time. It was my mistake. I take ownership of that. I've never done a Survey Monkey survey before. If you want to keep harping on that, that's fine.
It's not about harping on it.
But let me state something else.
Okay.
Okay? Because this goes to one of the core issues that a lot of people have with you. And if you're not going to take it constructively, your relationship here is over. Okay? It's not what you say that bothers people. It's how you say it. It's not the message that you're trying to get across. It's how you get that message across that is a major problem. And I'm not talking about this group necessarily. I'm talking about the users and tenants on the airport. That's the issue that we're hearing from people. Okay? You can't be barking at people, yelling at people, screaming at people. It's inappropriate.
Chair Golden, if I'm yelling and screaming at people, I would agree with you, that's inappropriate. And the way I found out about the survey was from a tenant.
I had contacted you
I
first
left you
thing Monday
voicemail and you
morning.
called me back. That's correct.
I contacted you first thing
Okay.
Monday morning.
All right.
Anyone else have any comments on this matter? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to move on.
Well, is there, just point
Yes,
of
sir.
clarity, is there an action that's needed to form or to agree to form or disagree to form the committee that was just being discussed?
It's informal. We don't need an action to, it's a voluntary subcommittee. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but we don't need any sort of action to do that.
You could do it either way.
Okay, thanks.
Just checking.
Everybody comfortable moving on, or anyone want a break? If not, we will just move on. This is item number 3, discussion and possible action, review airport manager contract, annual renewal window, and decision notice. I went to, let me pull my mask off here, took the liberty to review the employment agreement that we have with the airport manager, and found some things in there that I felt were important to discuss in an open meeting, public forum with the airport authority. Can't do that in a closed meeting. Can't do it amongst 4 of us. That doesn't work. Violates the open meeting law. And as I mentioned to Ken, he asked me, why is this on the agenda? And I said, Ken, 2 things. I said, number 1, we need to have a candid and open discussion amongst the airport authority and with you about this and with your employment relationship here. And I said that I am of the opinion that your relationship with the airport needs to change, your employment relationship. And so I put it on the agenda for that reason. Now, one of the things that caught my attention, and I'm going to be discussing quite a bit, but I'm going to give members of the airport authority time to discuss this also, is that this agreement automatically renews every single year on an annual basis, unless either party gives notice of termination of at least 60 days prior to the end of the term. The anniversary date end of the term is March 22nd of each year. Therefore, it was appropriate, in my opinion, to have this discussion now while that window is there and not later. And you may say, well, why do we want to have it now? Why can't we have it at some other date? We could. We've never had this discussion before. And this is the problem I have with automatic renewing agreements. When you have an automatically renewing agreement, what happens is it sits on a shelf somewhere, collects dust. People don't know about it. They don't even know the terms of it. Heck, nobody in this room, spare 3 people, and I'm not one of them, knew about this agreement, let alone knew the contents of it and the terms of it. And I am vehemently opposed to automatic renewals. It puts this airport, it puts any organization in a bad situation. I don't care if it's a vendor agreement, if it's a lease, I don't agree to them at all. Had I known it was in there, I would have spoken up, but at the time when I was on the airport authority, it was early on. I didn't even know what went into the agreement, didn't vote on the agreement. In fact, we voted to hire Ken, but the agreement was to be negotiated between Larry Harvey, as I recall, Steve Takis, and Ken. I think, Bradley, you may have known about the agreement, but none of the members of the airport authority did. Since then, so I didn't know about it. Carl's new. Paul, Tim, and Stan are all new to the authority, and now is really the appropriate time to discuss this. Let me preface this too. I've known Ken for a long time, much longer than Ken has been employed with us, had a relationship here with us. And in fact, Ken reached out to me, sorry about that. Ken reached out to me early on when I was on the airport authority. I might have been on the airport authority a month or so, and said, hey, I hear there is a potential opportunity on the airport authority, on the airport for a new manager. And my first words out of my mouth at the time, this was dating back a number of years now, going on 4 years, was, gosh, Ken, I'm so glad you called. Would you consider applying for that position? I was I supported Ken to pursue the position with us. I advocated for Ken to take the position if it was offered to him. I did not sit on the interview panel. It was inappropriate for me to do so, conflict of interest, because Ken and I have known each other for a very long time and spoke to one another over the years on all sorts of matters. I felt it was inappropriate. So I didn't get involved in the hiring process, but certainly voted to hire Ken. And I think Ken has done a bang-up job in many veins of what he's doing. There's a lot of things that Ken's doing that no airport manager would have done at this airport, and I commend him for doing so. That said, I just wanted to preface it that, you know, I was a strong advocate for Ken to come on as our manager, you know, a number of years ago, and I stand by that decision, unwavering. But that said, there are some issues here that need to be discussed about Ken's relationship here, and they're hard discussions to have, but we have to have them in this open setting this evening, without question. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to members of the airport authority before I state what I have to state. And we'll start with Vice Chair Harris.
I'll try and keep this brief. My feeling is this was a negotiated contract. I know I was involved in some of the language. Steve was involved. You know, we were given the orders of the board to go and do a contract. It was negotiated, it was put in place. So I am absolutely opposed to making any change to the contract. I think I want to amend a little bit of what Michael's saying. There's absolutely nothing preventing the board from taking action against the manager for cause anytime during this contract. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as there's that for cause clause in there, I'm okay with it. As far as the renewing, whether you like it or not, is something that we negotiated, we agreed to, and I think that we need to stick to that because You know, it's what we negotiated. Otherwise, we'd be forcing our manager to make a change to his contract, and that's not negotiating, okay? He negotiated that contract before he came on, and now we want to, while he's here, he's dependent on this position, we want to now force in another deal, and I don't think that's right. The other thing I worry about is, as we do this gang up on Ken night, we talk about contracts, we talk about surveys, we talk about everything, that, this stuff is public, it's recorded. At some point, we will want a new manager, because at some point, this guy's gonna either say, I've had it, or he's gonna say, I'm ready to retire. And if we have harassed him, changed his contract, and threatened him, which all these things we seem to be doing tonight, we're going to have a heck of a time hiring good management in the future. And I think it's extremely important that we knock it off to protect our future ability to get a good airport manager. And I think it's particularly true when you have negotiated a contract, that you stick with it. That's all I have to say.
John?
I agree with Member Harris absolutely, that there's nothing in this contract that keeps us from managing or disciplining our employee if for a cause, if we feel it's necessary. So I think that that's not an issue with the contract. I also would say that if we weren't going to do automatic renewals, I would be really opposed to yearly renewals. I think that doesn't make any sense at all in an environment where many of the actions that you take today take 3 to 5 years to come to fruition. I think that would bother me if we said, oh, we want yearly renewals. Other than that, I have no opinion.
Carl, do you have anything you want to weigh in on this?
So my comments and questions here, just to give clarity on my framing, are all about the document, how it came to be, and some things that have me scratching my head. I am also not in favor of things that renew automatically because of the reasons that the chairman stated. They have a tendency to not stimulate review, okay, because they are on autopilot. But I think more importantly, it constrains to very specific windows, times when you can raise issues, take actions, and they have to very preciously coincide with meetings that are hard to schedule of a public board and this and that. It leads me to kind of say why. Why was it written that way? My officer role as the president of our company has to be reviewed by the board of directors and approved every year. It's a choice. You don't have to do it that way. But it reminds the entire organization that each year there needs to be a conversation. And it's not just about the performance and the fit and the what have you of the tenant of the role. It also invites update and review of the document and the agreement and so forth. So I do have a question about that. I noticed also that in the different termination pay scenarios of Section 6.4, there is not one for termination by CCAA without cause. Well, I mean, maybe the outcome would be if you did that, you owe them the balance of the year. I don't know. But the absence of a clause to cover that scenario, to me, and I'm not the attorney, but I've done a lot of these, feels like a flaw in the document. So I would love to understand why specifically there isn't a clause that covers that scenario, whether or not it would be likely to be invoked, or whatever the penalty, shall we say, would be for that. But I think that my third and final thing I would just want to mention here is understanding exactly why the employment of the airport manager in this scenario is specifically not an at-will employment. I mean, I've got 576 employees, and aside from about 3 who have long-term comp bonus arrangements and stuff that really have to be very specifically encoded, every other click bonder is at will. And I'm just curious as to what the history, and if that was a negotiated term at a one-year renewal, okay, it's not to give some sort of long-term comfort and things. So I'm just curious as to why this was created as an employment contract in the first place versus an at-will employment with an employee handbook. And I'll say that I recognize as I was heading out the door the last time on this authority, we really found ourselves doing some soul searching and recognizing that next time around, there was going to be a lot more clarity around role definition and expectations, performance management, documentation of how these things would be reviewed. And I see a lot of wonderful signs that that happened. But that doesn't mean there has to be a contract. And so I guess that was just one of my questions as to how did we end up going that direction versus just defining the role very clearly, the expectations very clearly, setting up a really good performance review process, but doing it in an at-will environment. So I guess it's more questions for the new guy rather than comments.
And if I may respond to one thing, Carl, that is, and you'll hear me state it later, where I feel this needs to go. Ken, like everybody else in the world, needs to be an at-will employee. I just can't see why this agreement is the way it is. So we'll discuss that further. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, I just want to respond to a couple of those questions. Steve Takis, Airport Council. Member Hutter, there is a provision for termination without cause for compensation. It's at the top of page 6. It's 6.4A, termination without cause, and it explains how compensation works.
If the manager terminates.
I see what you're saying. And it doesn't have a provision that says if the airport authority terminates without cause.
That's correct.
Okay, I got you.
That
I
was
understand your question now. The second thing is the question as to why I think we looked at a contract at the time, and I don't remember this with specificity, but my understanding is that one of the problems we had with the prior airport manager is there was no clear statement as to what his responsibilities were. There was no clear statement as to what the goals are and whether there would be some kinds of benchmarks to make. And so that's one of the reasons it was reduced to writing. Could it have been done simply as these are the job duties and you'd be an employee at will? I believe it could have, but that wasn't the approach that the airport authority board members took at that time. In terms of negotiation, honestly, I don't remember I don't remember having discussions with Ken about this term's out and this term's in. I just don't remember that. If it happened, it happened. But I think it was more like we generated, we being the airport board members, generated a contract. We offered to Ken. Ken may have had a couple of tweaks to it. I don't even remember. And down the road we went. So I'm not sure there was a lot of discussion there. And Ken, if you remember something differently or some specifics, that's
No, I was
fine.
basically presented with the agreement, and there was some discussion about salary. We agreed on the salary. I think the one tweak had to do with some training and accreditation, maintaining accreditation, that sort of things. But it was essentially, do I get I need a laptop, I need this, I need that, those type of things.
Yeah, and I think we had some discussions about insurance coverage too.
Right.
because you came with some of your own, so we
As
tried to
opposed
accommodate
to,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
me being on the airport's insurance.
But so beyond that, I'm sorry I don't have any illumination as to why it was set up this way. That was the course that they took. I think it was partially a reaction, maybe it's a swing of the pendulum from our last situation where we had an airport manager who did not have a clearly stated set of requirements. And the end result is the airport authority had real difficulty trying to pin him down as to, okay, it's not working, where do we go from here? And then as to the 1 year clause, I don't even remember discussing that. You know, it sounds like it could be done either way. It could be done the way way that you are evaluated within your company, Member Hutter, which is every year they vote again to renew it, or in this case, it's every year you vote whether or not you're going to renew it. You kind of get to the same place. But you're right, this deviates a bit from the right to work standard that we enjoy in the state of Nevada, which some states don't have.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Stan, you got any comments? No? Okay. Tim?
Yeah, Tim Pulis. If I was on the board at the time of this agreement, I would have voted not to have an annual, a yearly contract. I'd have voted to have an at-will employee. And this has nothing to do with Ken's performance at all. This is strictly as being a businessman for 42 years. I would never purposefully put something like that into an employment contract. Carl had some mention of some very special people that had some performance clauses associated with compensation. That's different, and I acknowledge that. But as far as personally, I think that's poor business practice to have an annual contract. I don't think it really has much to do with how we manage the airport manager going forward, but for me, it was just a poor decision to make in the contract, that's all, so.
So that you're aware, Tim, and Bradley, I'm sure you can ratify this, and John also, because we were on the airport authority at the time, we didn't vote on this. We voted to hire Ken because he went through the interview panel and was selected as the best candidate. I certainly stood behind that decision because I brought him, you know, kind of in, if you will, really encouraged him to apply and work with us, but we didn't know the terms.
Yeah, that makes more sense. It was just.
We didn't vote on this agreement. That's for certain.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, John or Bradley. I don't ever recall.
We didn't vote on this specific contract. What we did was instruct our council and some other folks that worked on it. I worked a little bit on the incentives. I mean, I'm not the incentive, but the benefit side of things. But it was instructed to reach an agreement on this. So I mean, I'm just saying that we can't say the board didn't know anything about this because they gave instructions to this guy over here and this guy over here to come to an agreement, and they did exactly what we asked them to do. So, you know, I think that's a pretty poor argument.
I think it's a curiosity item that at the time when Ken was hired, I think that the process of negotiating this contract was primarily led by Member Harvey, who is a ClickBond employee. And so I guess it kind of surprises me that in an environment where in his work life, he would never sign anything but an at-will contract. And then in this particular case, he chose differently. It'd be really interesting to just sort of dissect how that could happen. Bradley, do you have any information on how that happened?
Just as you described it.
That's exactly my recollection, too. It was deferred to Larry Harvey, and we just made the decision to hire Ken, not necessarily, you know, hammer out an agreement with.
Well, we made a decision to hire him under, and give him a contract. And we
Yeah.
said, do this. So
And
again,
we authorized Larry. to
again,
work with-
I don't think, I mean, this was negotiated, it was negotiated before he was actually hired. And I just have a problem with now saying, oh gee, we don't like it. I mean.
Well, okay, that's fine.
This is a board that was the same board with different people on it. I do not want to see a situation where we're putting pressure on our manager because now he is employed, that we're saying, you've got to, we're going to take this contract away from you if you want to keep your job, because sounds like that's where we're going. And he negotiated this thing before he came. It was part of the agreement. Please, let's not go there.
Paul?
I tend to agree with Carl and Tim that you know, I think that having not a yearly contract, but a monthly contract, like most of us have to, in our jobs, you know, perform properly and be evaluated. And I think we should do a better job at perhaps evaluating perhaps every month. And I agree that a year is too long. So, because when we come down to this, what are we going to do to improve? I mean, we have to have some type of measurement to, are we making progress at this, and how do we do that? And if we have that on perhaps a monthly basis, I think that would be helpful for us all to move forward and be a faster acting group.
Okay. There's quite a few things I could say here. I'm going to refrain from saying them, in a lot of them at this time, but we'll say a few things. Number one, I disagree with some of the sentiments. My counterparts strongly disagree. There's no reason why this agreement could not be terminated by a vote of this airport authority this evening, and the manager continue his employment here as an at-will employee like the rest of the world. To have a golden parachute in this hamstrings this airport authority, and this is just not a good agreement for the benefit of the airport. We represent the airport authority. That's what we do. We don't represent an employee. I'm taking this position for a number of reasons, but I want to point out a few things. As I read through the agreement, let me read a few things to you right out of the agreement. You guys are okay with that, right? Good. The chairman of the Carson City Airport Authority may take disciplinary action on matters for cause in lieu of termination, and such action shall include notice to the manager and a right of review by the CCAA of actions taken. That's right in this agreement. Here's another one. Failure to follow through on requests or directions made by CCAA members, and such said failure could impede the business of the airport or the Carson City Airport Authority. That would be a matter of cause. When Ken was hired, one of the reasons we hired him, one of the reasons I was 110% behind him, was because he came from Reno, and I knew Ken from Reno, and he had the position of, what was it, Director of Economic Development, Ken?
No, I managed general aviation properties at Reno instead.
Right, but didn't you have an economic development title at one time?
No, I worked for the Director of Economic
Okay, so
Development.
you worked for the Director of Economic Development. And he was hired to support economic development at the airport. Let me read another general duty that comes right out of this agreement. one of Ken's objectives, essential core function. Develop and implement plans for economic and business development that work to maximize the use of landside and airside airport-owned lands to enhance the budget and ensure the future financial viability of the airport. It's been 3 years, folks, that Ken's been here. We haven't signed a single new land lease in 3 years' time. Bradley pointed something out that's absolutely true. We have to take responsibility for that ourselves too, as an airport authority. But that was one of the core functions described right in here in this agreement. Another one is optimizing airport utilization by attracting new business, airport tenants, and based. Go ahead, please.
I thought we were discussing contracts and not doing a performance review, and this sounds very much like a performance review.
This is written right into the contract.
I know it's written right in the contract. You can talk about the language. I think you're way off topic if you want to do yet again another performance review. So
this is
please stay on the topic on the agenda.
Oh, hold on a second, Bradley. The reason this is on the agenda, and let me state it again, I put this on the agenda. This was my doing. Because this airport authority, this body of us, needs to have an open and candid conversation about our manager and about this agreement. That's why I put it on the agenda. And I will respectfully remind you that there were members of this airport authority who fought me on this. And Ken fought me on this, did not want this on the agenda. If we don't have this open and candid conversation, then we are failing to conduct our duty and our fiduciary obligation to the airport. Yes, sir.
What's missing from my viewpoint is, we need to have a regular, open, candid conversations with our employees, not in a public forum, Michael. This does not belong in this forum. This belongs in a yearly performance review that is demanded by the airport authority and performed by the people we designate to do it. Specifically, your name is mentioned in there that that the airport manager works for you. Right? I really have a problem with this being a matter of public record. I don't think it belongs here. I think what might belong here is the results of a performance review that was performed person to person, with our employee, with a recommendation that comes back and say, based on these performance metrics and this performance, we need to do something. But I think this is a horrible venue to be doing the performance review.
Well, you know what, John? I appreciate your comment, and I respectfully disagree. And I'll tell you why. We have, like I said, Ken does a good job at what he does a good job at. But we also have a problem with Ken's conduct. And since you don't want to have the conversation, let me explain to you why we're having it. When I wanted to have this conversation in closed session, I was advised by Airport Council that the best way to have this conversation, for the sake of transparency, was to have it in open meeting, in accordance with the open meeting law. I have a list right here of actions of misconduct by the manager. Many of them I've talked to him about, unresolved. I have testimonies signed by a whole stack of them, signed by people. Do you want me to go down that road? Because I will. This needs to be addressed now, not a month from now, once this agreement automatically renews. It needs to be addressed now. It's why it's on the agenda. You don't have a conversation like this in a closed session, because then it leads to speculation as to what was said. I'm sorry, that's just the fact of the matter. This is not a publicly held company. It's not a private organization. It's a public entity. And that's the way these things are handled.
I don't think John said anything about a closed session. I think he suggested following the process that's lined out in this contract and then sharing the results of a one-on-one or two-on-one or whatever conversation with the whole group. And I agree that is much more appropriate than this public grilling. And I want to say something right now. The further this goes, the worse it gets. First of all, I want to apologize to Ken for my involvement in this survey thing. It is a disaster. It is not at all how I imagine it being used. I have to say, I sent questions to Michael, suggested questions. Michael didn't even know he had them. They were in his Carson City email. Then he sent out a request to the whole group saying, hey, send me questions so that I can put the survey together. He already had the suggested questions, and what this group agreed to was that you and I were going to work on a survey. Instead, we end up getting this caterwaul of questions from everywhere. You weren't informed it was going out. There was no good introduction as to why it was being used or how it was going to be used. And now it's really kind of it's turned into everything I hoped it wouldn't. And I did not want this to be the whip that the board used on you, and that's what it's turned out to be. I wanted it to be a benchmark so we could look for improvement. And I wanted it to be a benchmark for you and for the board. And so far, all we seem to be able to do is tell you, you got to get better. So I am very sorry that happened. I feel terrible I was involved, and I am sorry I ever suggested a survey. I would not have allowed there to be any, I would have suggested that there not be any anonymous comments. So this whole thing has, I thought we were working together on it. This guy works a weekend and just sends it out. I don't know anything about it. You don't know anything about it. I apologize. That shouldn't have worked that way. And secondly, I apologize for this despicable performance review you're getting today. I know that the only thing that's going to come out of this is disengagement. This is not the way to do it. Public shaming never works, and that's exactly what's going on here today. I am sorry that the people on this board do not have the talent to be able to sit down and have a one-on-one and change performance, but apparently they do not. I know you and I have had a lot of one-on-one discussions. We've talked about how to handle this. We've talked about how to handle that. We've talked about some of your reactions at the meetings and that sort of thing. And you have always taken my feedback and put it to good use. So I don't understand why somebody sitting next to me says that doesn't happen for him. I know it happens for me. So again, I apologize. I am sorry to be any part of this disrespectful performance review you're receiving. I think it's disgusting. I hope it never happens again. And I hope we can stop right now because, this is not going to be positive for the airport. It is not going to turn out that way.
Brett? Yeah, Steve Takis, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the item on the agenda is the review or the renewal window in the employment contract. And I did advise the chairman that if you're going to look at that review window, this is the time to do it because you can't look at it a month from now. It will not be ripe again for another year. And his response was, that's when I want to look at it, when it has some meaning. He also indicated to me that he would be presenting reasons why he thought that review window should be considered now. And I've heard him start down that path, and it sounds like he's being cut off. I haven't heard him actually express his rationale. I don't think this is a rehash of the previous item in the survey. That item's already been heard. We could always go back to it, I guess, under the open meeting law, but I didn't hear that that's what's going on. And so I think that, you know, my legal advice is you have to hear him out and find out what his rationale is. Because what I've just heard is another board member's belief as to what he's saying, and really, let's hear what he has to say. That's really the correct approach under the open meeting law.
You know, I'm trying to give everyone a chance to speak here. Okay? I haven't had that opportunity because you didn't want to have this discussion. We're going to have this discussion now. I'm the chair of the airport authority. Please respect that. Paul, did you have something to say?
Well, yeah, and I'm really sorry we're unhappy with the results. And the problem, and what was the survey perfect and this, that? No, it wasn't. But let's move on and get over it. We've identified we have a problem. And part of the problem is that that seems to be being ignored. And it can't be ignored. We have a big problem, and that needs to be fixed. I'm dealing with it every day. It must be nice to not have, you know, wherever you're working, you don't deal with the people on a day-to-day basis, saying the same things I said in the comments here. This is a daily basis. Today, I had 2 people chase me back to my hangar to make sure that I represented them and worked on this and somehow find a solution. That solution is being ignored by this board. And it's getting incredibly frustrating that we're not really addressing the problem. The survey addressed the problem. Now we need to solve it, and this contract is one way to perhaps get there. When we look at the contract, it says in here, I can see this, investigates and resolves tenant complaints with the objective of positive tenant relations. Well, that is not happening. It's in the contract, and as a part, I guess, are we going to enforce the contract or change it? I guess that's the question. I think revising this to be more modern to our current needs is a good idea.
I'm going to remind everyone. Oh, go ahead, please, Bradley.
I just think that the time to revise it is when we have a new manager, but this should stay in place until his employment ceases with us, whether that's because we get rid of him or he leaves or retires or whatever. This was something that was negotiated. And again, taking it away now, it was negotiated before he started. It was part of the value of the job, and now you're going to take away some of that value. I hate to use the word fair because everybody says there's no such thing as fair. This is extremely unfair. But, and as far as Steve, your comment, all I was doing was trying to apologize, and I've apologized.
You know, Bradley, I wish you had the same concern for our airport tenants, okay? Because I'm going to go through a lot of this. I'm going to remind you what it says here in this agreement. The chairman of the Carson City Airport Authority may take disciplinary action on matters for cause in lieu of termination. I have that authority. Can sign this agreement. It's right in there. Because you asked for it, I'm going to start going through my list. Okay? I didn't want to do this, but you're forcing it on us.
I'm not forcing anything on you, Michael.
The time to deal with this is now. You're saying you don't want to deal with this.
No, I'm saying
this should not be aired in public, you say.
I think the best thing to do is to raise this as a motion, say, do the majority of these 7 people agree or disagree with taking the contract away? I don't want to be here all night.
Okay, well, I'm gonna.
Why don't
I'm
you
gonna
just
take
make
my
that
time-
motion? Why don't
Well,
you
no,
just make that motion?
Because I think when I read what I have to read, it may even sway your opinion. Tim, you had your hand up?
I just was hoping we could actually take a vote on this and vote if we want to go ahead and approve whether or not we want to amend the contract.
Well, this is not a negotiation.
Oh, it's not a vote?
No,
Oh,
hold
okay.
on. Let me explain this. And I promised Ken this would not be a negotiation. Okay? I don't believe in negotiating a contract in a public setting. But this airport authority can no longer sit here with a tin ear to what's going on at this airport. Okay? And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to recommend, but I'm going to start with my list because, boy, do I have a lot here. I want to read you a letter.
Wait a minute.
Well,
I object to you punishing Ken with that information because of what I said to you.
okay. Member Hamilton's asked if we can take a break. Let's take a 5-minute break. 5-minute break. You got it. We're going to adjourn for 5 minutes. this meeting back to order. Is everybody seated? Okay, good deal. Myself and Vice Chair Harris conferred at the break on the matter at hand. And in lieu of us taking the opportunity to discuss a number of deficiencies and communication problems that we've been having here, we're going to go to a recommendation. But before we go there, I want to read the last sentence on page 10 of the employment agreement. And it's titled, it's just one sentence, titled Reporting Relationships. Manager is to report to the Carson City Airport Authority primary contact with the chairman of the authority, as well as their other officers and authority members. So the chairman is supposed to be the primary contact with the airport authority. Just want to point that out to everyone. Now, I have a recommendation here that I'm going to suggest so that we can close out this discussion. There's a whole lot of reasons I'm recommending this, but we're going to forego the discussion of those reasons at this time. I am going to suggest that this employment agreement be terminated, effective immediately, and that the manager continue his employment with the airport authority under the same economic terms and conditions as set forth in the agreement, and that sections 6.1C, section 6.3, 6.4, C, all be deleted. So again, what we're doing here is we're changing this, we're terminating this agreement, and Ken can be employed by us, but on an at-will basis. So the airport authority can terminate employment with the manager at any time for any reason, just like any other employee at any other organization. And I would advocate that we go that route. The other two options would be to terminate this agreement and terminate Ken's employment, which I'm not advocating for. That's a possibility at this time. Another, yes, sir, Stan?
Would you please repeat those?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Would you repeat what you want to terminate?
Yes, sir. I'm advocating that this employment agreement be terminated by vote of the airport authority, which is what's required, and that the airport manager continue his employment with the airport under the same terms and conditions as set forth in the agreement, with the exception of Section 6.3, Section 6.4, subsection C, and that would enable us, correct me if I'm wrong, counsel, to convert this to an at-will agreement. If Ken chooses to accept it, he remains employed with us, just that there is no further obligation on our part to have an automatic renewal in here. And in fact, I did state that wrong. So section 1.4 we would strike the automatic renewal.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, what you are suggesting is you would utilize the 1-year opportunity to terminate the agreement and then offer Ken the same terms in this agreement without the provisions you identified, which appear to be the provision for the 1-year renewal and the provisions on termination for cause, so that you would have an agreement left that just is termination at will without the ability to terminate for cause.
And, that is correct, and there would be no termination pay under definition for cause. So section 6.3 would be deleted.
You know, I'm just getting a little bit lost on this, because if ultimately, you know, the authority can't unilaterally change a contract, you know.
No, but we
just
can
like
terminate the
But you
contract.
can terminate this contract, and you can give Ken an offer of the same terms without the 1-year renewal. I'm not sure why, I mean, you can, you know, my role is to tell you what's legal, not the reasoning, but you could remove the provisions for termination by cause, but I don't know why you would, oh, I see what you're doing. You're removing those because otherwise the only way you can terminate is for cause.
For cause,
And
which
so-
would
Okay.
then trigger a golden parachute.
Okay, so what you're doing is you're removing the 1-year renewal, automatic renewal, and then removing the provisions for cause, which would leave you with an at-will agreement.
Correct.
But all of the economic terms, you know, the pay. and
Remain the
everything
same.
else remain the same, and the duties would remain the same. And so, yeah, you could legally take that action, and then it would be up to Ken as to whether he
Yeah,
wants
if
to
he
work
wants
under those
to
terms.
remain with the airport authority, it's not a negotiation. He can accept or reject, bottom line. Now, the other options would be to terminate, which again, I'm not advocating for at this time, or keep the agreement in place. And I don't believe that is a good place for this airport to be.
Michael, we're kind of getting away from our agreement.
Okay.
Our agreement was we were going to vote on this contract,
Well,
whether it stayed
we
in
have to
place or not.
we have to explain
I
that.
understand, but you're talking about whether we fire him, we said we were going to vote on this contract.
We
So
did.
let's get there.
Yeah, but I'm not going to make the motion. I'm explaining what the options are. That's all. Would that be fair, Bradley? Because I want to make sure you and I are in agreement on that.
Well, we were in agreement. We were in agreement that we were going to ask that someone bring up a motion.
Okay.
All right? And we were not talking about whether we were going to terminate somebody or something. We were talking about the contract.
Okay.
And we're getting
So
way
would
off topic.
Okay. Would anyone like to move to do just that?
I will move that we terminate the contract as described.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I just want to, you okay if I make it clear? Okay. To terminate the existing employment contract and to continue employment with Ken on the same economic terms and conditions and all other terms and conditions set forth in this agreement, with the automatic renewal being removed, the termination for cause provision being removed, and the termination pay for cause being removed.
Chair Golden, can I have a clarification, please?
Yes, sir.
My salary is not reflected of what's in the contract.
Well, that needs to be reflected.
I think that would be important.
Yeah, I think that would be very important. And I'll let you work that out with us, whatever it is. I mean, we're not asking you to take a hit.
Well, the terms of the original agreement are not the same as they were.
Understood.
when you hired me. All right.
So it would be at your current rate of pay. Would that be accurate?
Clarification, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yes, sir. I don't see why not.
The other thing I want to, there are some other things in the contract that would need to be brought up to date on the benefit side. So just to note that.
Yes, John? Carl.
Another clarification then of the motion before us. The way that I've heard the chairman phrase it, it sounds like we're terminating an employment agreement and entering into another employment agreement that is just different. Now, this may just be semantics. Maybe the intent the chairman is bringing up here is that we are going to terminate this employment agreement, a contract, if you will, and move to an at-will employment relationship that preserves the same compensation that the manager currently enjoys, certain allowances for cell phone and so forth and so on. That is, to my ear, different than entering into a new employment contract that happens to strike certain clauses of this employment contract. And I want to be very clear that, one of my personal thoughts on the goodness of the action that is contemplated here is to indeed move to an at-will relationship for a number of reasons. I want to be very clear as to whether it's being suggested that we do that and that you're just trying to use some shorthand for it's basically the same stuff when it comes to what you're paid and your benefits and so forth, as opposed to actually getting into another employment contract that just happens to not auto-renew, because that goes down a weird road, because if you've pulled out the termination for cause definitions, you're now in a very strange space if it's indeed a employment contract that runs a term of a year.
Yeah, we don't want an employment contract that runs a term of a year. Okay, what are you suggesting, Carl? Because what I'm trying to preserve here is that there's no economic impact on the manager. That's not the point of this. And that the general duties and reporting criteria stay the same. Reimbursement of business expenses, et cetera, all remains the same.
Right. So I think that here's the challenge is in a business where I guess we don't have one employee, we do have two. There are things that are defined in this contract and probably nowhere else that in your normal place would be existing somewhere as employment policies, kind of general employment terms, an employee handbook that would describe certain things, and you'd reference that, and it wouldn't be in an employment agreement per se. It's I accept this job at this pay with these benefits pursuant to my understanding of this employee handbook, right?
Right, and essentially a letter of employment or a letter, an offer.
An offer of employment at will with these conditions. And I think, Vice Chairman, that you're on the right track here is if we, not trying to make this difficult, if we were to take the general duties as described in Exhibit A, if we were to take the things that are important and meaningful in, clarifying aspects of the job from this agreement and put them in a at-will employment offer, that would then be understood and accepted or not, hopefully accepted, that I think that would cover it. My question to council would be, are there things in here that the airport authority needs to look at, whether it wants, like an arbitration clause, that specifically would need to be agreed to in a certain way? And if we were to be outside of this employment agreement, would there be things that would catch your legal eye that we should be aware of?
Frankly, I'm not seeing any. If you remove the employment, the termination provisions and utilize this instead as the terms of an employment at will offer, I'm not seeing anything else that jumps out at me. There is no problem with having an arbitration. There could still be disputes, and so there should still be the ability to arbitrate. I'm not seeing anything else in here.
I think there would be some other clauses, and we don't have to necessarily litigate or wordsmith this right here.
Could I,
But I was going to say, it seems that some of the things in your 6.4, like, would then be extraneous. I mean, you wouldn't, for example, keep 6.4D, termination upon disability or termination upon death. I mean, if you can't go to the job, you don't have the job, right? So I think there's some stuff that could be pruned if we went this way.
I'd like to make a suggestion, and I hate to propose a solution to what I think is not a problem, but this is really two different things. One is terminating this contract. One is a letter of employment. They do not have to come at the same time. They don't have to come today. There is plenty of time to work on a letter of employment, an offer letter to Ken that we can all look at and all that sort of thing. The issue tonight is whether Ken keeps his contract. And the termination date is in the future anyway, is it not?
That's true, it is.
So we got two different issues. Let's deal with the contract issue and let's work on an employment letter later, okay? Let's keep
That's
this
fair.
simple.
Okay, I was trying to outline it all.
But let us understand
everybody's
that is
benefit.
correct observation that it is a notice period, and if we take action to terminate this contract, you're really giving notice within the window that it will expire and not be renewed at its conclusion date. But unless I'm mistaken, counsel, we have to have our act together by that point, because once this agreement expires, absent something to take its place, like an at-will employment offer, there's no definition around the role.
That's correct. You've got 60 days essentially to come up with the terms of the offer, which could be as simple as simply striking a bunch of paragraphs out of this, retitling it an offer at will employment, and giving it to Ken so that he has the assurance that he has no break in employment, so to speak.
Thank you for the clarifications.
Okay, so with that then, and that's what Bradley is suggesting, is that we have a vote to terminate the contract. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
If I might amend that motion or suggest an amendment, the wording might not be to terminate the contract, but rather to not renew, a positive decision to, a motion to not renew this contract at its expiration date. Because if we were to terminate it, you're in a different space.
Hold on a second, before we go there, Carl. Steve, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think the terminology would be to give notice that the term is not being renewed.
Okay,
Give notice of termination at least 60 days prior to the end of the term. So the motion would be to give notice of termination at this time.
okay, so we are giving notice of termination of the agreement.
Yeah, and it would, to me, it makes sense to couple that with the actions you're going to take in conjunction with that, which is get together within the next 60 days so that you can give Ken a solid offer, so you don't leave him in the lurch.
Yeah, that's not the intent.
Okay, so the movement would be that I move that we go ahead and go forward with terminating the existing contract,
Employment agreement.
employment agreement,
Giving notice of termination.
giving notice
No,
of
no, 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 no.
termination,
No.
Allowing it to expire?
allowing it to expire, and also committing to come up with a replacement agreement within 60 days for employment.
I think we're trying to do that separately. So it's just the motion on terminating the agreement.
Not terminating, allowing it to expire.
Giving notice, the phraseology in the document is unless the CCAA gives notice of termination, that's how it's written.
Okay, so it is terminate. It's notice of termination.
Right. We're not terminating it early.
We're giving notice of termination. Hey, Carl, suggestion, why don't you make the motion?
Okay. May I suggest an amended motion that we move to give notice of termination as defined in the employment agreement, and allow the employment agreement thus to terminate or expire at the end of its one-year term.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? What? Well, okay. I think, I didn't know you wanted to discuss it more. Okay, go ahead. You just have to ask the question. Any discussion? Any discussion?
Steve, are you trying to get in there? Oh.
Just saying to use your microphone because I'm hearing some chatter and it's not coming through.
Okay, so no discuss, we good there?
I will, in the spirit of discussion, offer some thinking, because I've seen it done this way, that I support the decision, or I support the motion as it's been presented because of some of the flaws that I have noted or the deficiencies in the agreement itself that have been pointed out, whether it be in no definition of the scenario for CCAA termination without cause. And those are scenarios that could come up. With all respect to Ken, some sort of, Uber manager, whatever that means, descends from the heavens and is, so compelling. But we have a unaddressed scenario in the agreement as currently written. The auto renewal clause, I think, does not benefit good process. And I do also want to say that moving at this point to an at-will agreement, in addition to just being generally better for the organization, better for the airport, and I think a more advantageous footing for the airport, gives us also the agility, maybe the right word, to, respective of some of the issues that have been brought up, the improvement that we know we all want to do collaboratively in service of our airport community, gives, I think, the authority a lot more options to work collaboratively with the manager, to look at definitions of performance improvement, periodic review, some things that would give us a lot more options, I think, to address this professionally than the current agreement provides. So thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Any other comment?
One quick comment from Tim. I
Yes,
would
sir.
like to say that I support this motion for the same reasons that Carl spoke, but I also want to imply that it has to be replaced by a replacement employment agreement at will that does not in any way take away the economic benefits that he currently is enjoying with the present contract.
Yeah, that's not the intent, so thank you. Okay. John, did you want to weigh in?
I just want to say, I think that the root cause of why this is under discussion is because we have been remiss in doing regular performance reviews for our managers. So what I mostly want out of this discussion is I want us to discipline ourselves to accomplish regular performance reviews with metrics so that we can show our community that we care and that we're taking action.
And John, I couldn't agree with you more, and I take some responsibility for that, and I'll tell you why. It had to do with public health. Ken had brought that up at one time. I think we were going to do what, Ken, in July?
I asked every year that I've been here to ensure that we do annual performance review for this very reason.
Yeah, but
And it was this year as well as
hold on.
previous year.
But when you asked, it was in July, is that correct? Do you recall?
I don't remember.
I think it was in July. And I said, Ken, we're going to get to it, but we're not doing it on a video conference meeting. That was my decision, and I stand by that decision.
Well, a performance review is always meant to be in person.
That's correct. But in order for this airport authority to meet in person, we could not do so at the time. I just want to remind you of that. And that was, again, I stand by that decision. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so is that, I see Stan, Tim, Paul, myself, Carl. All opposed? We have John and Bradley opposed. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, who is that?
Member Hutter.
Yes, sir.
And member, please, if I was maybe just a little quick to the gun there, maybe this is your motion to make. But I think that the timing wants to be, as discussed on the back of this, that between now, I would move that between now and the time of the expiration of the manager's employment agreement, that the authority draft and present to the manager an at-will employment offer reflective of his current salary, benefits, and generally speaking, the terms of, and description of the role as described in the employment agreement that's expiring.
Is there any reason we can't act on that, Steve? It seems like it's the same topic.
Yeah, it's related.
Okay, so we have a motion to do so. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, motion carries unanimously. And let me make a suggestion as chair of the airport authority. I'm going to suggest that we either call a special meeting. I'm going to let this be the discretion of the airport authority. Between now and the date this agreement expires, which is March 22nd, because it will expire and sunset then. I'm going to suggest we call a special meeting. I'll pick a date that works for everybody, and we have a manager's employment review. Is that the correct terminology? Is that close enough? We owe that to Ken, and I think there's quite a few of us who have quite a bit to say on that topic. And so we'll be calling a special meeting for that. That will not be a regularly scheduled meeting. Okay, but sometime probably in the next few weeks. So hopefully everyone's on board with that. I think we owe that to Ken.
You don't have to take action to do that. You can
Nope, just
simply
letting you
set
know.
it. Let me suggest, again, without taking any action, that by the next regular meeting, you have an offer prepared to give to Ken so that he isn't squeezed right up against the end of the 60-day period.
Okay. As the hour is getting late, there is one more item on the agenda, and this is the strategic annual work plan for next year. Is this something, Ken, and also Bradley, because the two of you are presenting this, is this something you want to do now, or would you like to punt until a later date?
I think punting is the most appropriate thing to do.
Okay, fair enough. Airport engineers report, do we want to discuss that at all?
I don't think the engineer's on the line anymore.
I don't blame him.
His report is in the packet. If you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
Okay. Ken, you have your manager's report?
I do. I placed one at each of your tables. It shows the fuel flow from 2019, 2020. It was down slightly this year, probably due to a couple of different factors. Under 10% was like 0.5%, and little impact on fuel flowage fee over the calendar year. The last JetNet activity report is in the packet. That subscription expired in December, so you won't be seeing those any longer. The land appraisals were completed on the property at Taxway Charlie and Bravo, and that came in at 30 cents a square foot a year, or 2.5 cents a square foot a month. And that includes the land that was along Bravo Taxway and the fence line with the that we share with the Through the Fence folks, and the other parcel that was appraised is on College Parkway. And that was primarily the area that's the two corner pieces, but I think can also be utilized for the area behind the fence, the aeronautical piece. But we may want to relook at that if we get an offer to, utilities are different than some of the other areas, et cetera. But it is prime real estate on East College Parkway. This appraisal will be updated, renewed every 6 months, and as part of our marketing plan, we're going to have some signage on College Parkway and near the fence line at the self-serve island. We're going to also update the website to include that info on our business development page. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's been live for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months at least. Additional digital advertising to be done on Hangar Trader and Hangar Network. I do have a development company from Southern California coming up in the future to look at some of the property and hangar development. Another digital marketing effort, I'm looking at LoopNet, which is primarily a commercial real estate website. See whether that makes sense for the airport. Also looking at the continued direct market outreach. As I stated previously, we did a direct mail during the campaign and may have got lost in some of the political mailings. However, I have had responses to that direct mail inquiries. And then part of the direct mail would also be focused on regional airports where you can come to Carson City and own your hangar as opposed to renting a hangar at some of those other facilities. That concludes my report. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Ken. Can I ask a question on your report?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question and a comment. I thought on the fuel flow year-over-year change, is that total fuel flow, Jet A and 100 low lead?
Yes.
Okay, so it was down 5.6%, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's amazing considering what we've been through as a nation during that time frame. That's absolutely.
Actually, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's 5%. Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then as you see, the dollar value of the fuel flowage fee was under it.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if the percentage was, for the full year.
Well, and that included the self-serve island being down for part of
Oh, that's
summer.
true too.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it was.
So there's some other impacts that.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying though, with the pandemic.
Right. And if you look at Jet A, it was actually up year over year on the full serve side. 100 low lead was down year over year on the full side. Self-serve was marginal impact. I mean, you're talking about a few hundred gallons.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the state hasn't flown.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying there's so many users that haven't flown.
Right.
What that's indicative of is people using the airport more.
Well, a lot of the conversations I've had with other airport managers in the region, but also in the Sunbelt states, have been that their activity levels have been up, where the northern states, they have been down. And I think that bodes similar to Carson City. We've had a mild winter so far, and I think it's, a lot of what we talked about last spring was, what kind of impact the airport was going to see. And at that point, my speculation, we weren't going to see a great deal of impact. We were.
Well, I think we're very fortunate.
Right.
Extremely fortunate. And so that you're aware, I don't track this on an annual basis. I only track this monthly. That's why I asked the question.
Well, that's why I've continued to, gather the data so that we have some year over year.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you did. Thank you. Appreciate it. Legal counsel report?
I don't have anything to report.
Okay, thank you. John, treasurer's report?
I'll spare you having to go and look at a bunch of numbers. If
Okay,
you
well,
have
I'm gonna put you on the spot then, okay? Ken and I met, a couple weeks ago to discuss the agenda, and I pulled some things off the agenda I said, we're going to have a long meeting. We're not going to have all these things on the agenda. And this is something for all of us to consider here. One of the things that's coming up on the agenda is the annual budget. And I don't know, I trust it's not prepared yet, but it's in the works. Again, not putting you on the spot, just Ken brought it to my attention. I don't know what we're going to be looking at in February. We're going to have a separate meeting for an employment review, completely separate, on its own, standalone. I don't know what the appetite is for the airport for the next meeting, but if we want to have a separate meeting for that budget, we could do that also. We don't have to approve the budget as an airport authority.
Well, you don't have to approve the tentative budget.
Right.
The treasurer submits the tentative budget. The airport authority approves the final budget in May. But it's always good when you can have those discussions at meetings before you propose the tentative budget, because then you know you're really close to the final budget. And so it makes that May hearing typically very short. And so starting it early is a good idea. Does it need to be started right now? Not necessarily, but it's important that you put it together and you have, input and figure it out. It's optimal, I should say, that you do it before the tentative budget, not required.
So what do you think we should shoot for? Next meeting? Or the March meeting?
You know what I'm really thinking you should do? I hate to say you should do, but you're the treasurer. I'd suggest you and Ken convene, have something together, and maybe send it to us by email for starters. That gets the process rolling, if you will.
Chair Golden, sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sir.
As we do in the past, this is what we did last 2 years, is we prepare a tentative budget, we review it, we bring it to the board for review, we make some modifications as we go forward, and have it by that May meeting for submittal.
No, understood.
Yeah, we've been on track for that.
I'm only looking at this from a perspective of management, time management, to make sure that the meeting is efficient. That's all, the only reason I'm looking at this. So how about this? I'll let you and Ken figure that one out.
Sounds good, yeah. We're not looking to shortcut the process in any way. We want to get full input from the community, and we want to do it in time to meet the state requirements for submission.
Okay.
In past lives of this, I recall that we would hold, the process would be just as described, with a kind of preliminary budget circulated, say, by email. In years that it was complex, then there would be potentially the special meeting, I think the chairman speaks of, which we called the budget workshop. And you could really go and kind of thatch through this stuff if it was particularly, challenging. And if it wasn't, just go on to the final meeting. So I think we can figure it out maybe when we get a little closer, but keep the option open.
Okay. Any other comments from Airport Authority members? Okay. Any public comment? Probably not. I trust the public has signed off at this point. Again, Stan, welcome. Sorry you had to be here in this meeting, but welcome. Appreciate your input. With that, we'll adjourn. We'll see you soon.